Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
For context, I'm a middle-aged man who lives on the outskirts of Parbold, a small English village. My house is the only one on a long, winding country road, but it does have a bus stop. From my bedroom window, I can see it on the other side of the road. It's quite handy, really. I never miss the morning bus to work, and I know the schedule by heart. That's why I was bewildered when I first noticed at 3:17 a.m. the bus on Saturday, the 14th of October. It woke me up, actually. I'm a light sleeper. I sat upright in my bed, twisted my body around, propped myself up on my knees, and gingerly inched the curtains open. The old lamppost on my road illuminated an ominous, fully gray, non-branded, single-decker bus. There was no interior lighting. I couldn't see a driver or any passengers. Now, this was obviously bizarre. Buses don't show up at that time in the morning, not in this country. Not in any town or city I know, anyway. Still, I assumed, as any person would, that times were changing. It seemed like a good idea. A bus for those who missed the last train home after a night out, perhaps. But that still didn't entirely make sense because very few people use my bus stop. It's a 10-minute walk from here to anywhere. I checked the schedule. Nothing. There was a bus at 11:07 p.m. on Friday evening, and there shouldn't have been another one until 6:05 a.m. Saturday morning. I watched the vehicle pull away and perhaps considered that it wasn't a public bus. Maybe it was a hired coach. It seemed like a reasonable explanation. I put it out of my mind and went back to sleep. However, it returned the next morning, and it continued to do so for weeks. Again, I checked the schedule. Still no mention of a 3:17 a.m. bus. I called the council, and they assured me that it wasn't a public bus. They said that I could contact the local authorities to report any suspicious activity. So I rang the police. They didn't care. They passed me over to some civil department with a forgettable name. That department passed me over to another department. Nobody was concerned. It became clear that each person I contacted just wanted me to tire of the whole thing and stop bothering them. And I gave up on seeking help. But I couldn't give up on my quest for an answer. I started making notes. The bus always arrived at exactly 3:17 a.m. It would linger for approximately 30 seconds. Nobody ever departed or boarded the vehicle. I took a picture of it and posted it on various forums. Nobody could identify the origin of the faceless gray bus, but one comment did stand out. I remember a user telling me that I should sell my house and move. They said that the bus was there for me. More importantly, they said that I shouldn't, under any circumstances, board it. Well, that seemed like a rather obvious piece of advice. I wasn't planning on boarding a sketchy, unlisted bus in the pitch-black hours of the morning. But everything changed on the 20th of November. The bus arrived on time, 3:17 a.m., I knelt on my bed and peeked at it through the curtain as it rounded the corner. Something was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Once the vehicle had rolled to a complete stop, I heard it. Somebody on the bus was screaming. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Silence followed, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. I knew I heard that scream. I watched the bus and waited. 30 seconds passed. A lot of time passed. When I finally peeled my eyes from the road to check my phone, it was 3:29 a.m. The bus hadn't moved. The world outside was still eerily quiet. I reattached myself to reality and started dialing 999. The call kept failing, and then I saw that I had no signal. None. I usually had signal at the house. I was freaking out, so I got up to turn on my bedroom light. Nothing. I flicked the switch back and forth. No power. The story was the same throughout the house. I was about to head out to the fuse box, but I looked out my living room window to see a blackened world. The lamppost was dead. It had to be a power cut. That was when I finally understood, for the first time in my 10 years of solitary living, that I was truly isolated. I had no neighbors, no friends, no family. I was all alone. The gravity of the situation dawned on me. I would have to leave the house. My self-preservation instinct was to stay indoors, but I couldn't ignore the disembodied scream that had echoed through the night. I knew it had come from the bus. I knew I couldn't live with myself if I were to dismiss it. Armed with a winter coat and a wind-up torch, I bravely ventured into the night, locking my door behind me. I tentatively strolled down my front path, stopping at the gate to cast the torchlight on the other side of the road. It revealed the gray, stationary, seemingly abandoned bus. There were no signs of life. Everything was so quiet. I swore to myself that I could hear my heartbeat in my eardrums. I swung the creaky gate open and began to cross the road, futilely attempting to steady my quaking knees. My torch wobbled in my shaky left hand, so I clasped my wrist with my right hand. I shone the light into the windows of the parked vehicle. There was definitely no driver, but it was an elevated coach, so I couldn't see whether there were any passengers. I walked around the front of the vehicle, summoning the courage to enter it. When I reached the other side of the bus, I stood still. I tried to control my breathing. I eyed the doors for what seemed an eternity, and I felt my entire body clench. The doors opened. My torchlight still wasn't revealing a driver. I couldn't see or hear anyone. I thought, for a brief moment, of that internet stranger who told me not to board the bus, but I couldn't get the scream out of my head. My gut told me that somebody was in danger. I stepped onto the bus and started to climb the stairs. The doors closed. I held the torch before me as if it were a weapon, and I gradually climbed the next set of stairs to the elevated passenger platform. I spent several seconds on each step, savoring what I felt could be my final moments on Earth. Then I illuminated the passenger area before me. I half expected to see nothing. No, there was somebody on the bus. The young girl was sitting in the middle seat on the back row. Her head was in her palms. She was crying. I couldn't see her face. "Are you okay?" I asked timidly. No answer. So I started to walk forwards. I didn't know whether there was anyone else on board, but I couldn't leave her. Once I was standing only a few yards in front of her, I knelt down in the aisle. "Are you okay?" I asked the second time. The girl's crying abruptly ceased, but she didn't lift her head from her hands. "You shouldn't have boarded the bus," she replied. My torch died. I furiously wound the lever at the side, but it didn't spring back to life. The girl and I had been plunged into darkness. Then I heard the bus doors open. I slowly turned my head to face the front of the bus. I could hear the sound of low, guttural breathing. It was followed by clunking footsteps. Dim moonlight shone through the front window, but it was sufficient to display a hulking figure at the other end of the aisle. A black specter with gangly limbs was moving toward us. He was hunched forward, and his elongated arms dragged along the tops of the seats. He was too tall and too wide to fit in the aisle. I turned to face the girl. She'd lifted her head from her hands. I could barely see her. I could barely hear her. "This is the last stop," she whispered. "I was really hoping you wouldn't board. I wanted more time." Before I could even comprehend what was happening, I felt an icy limb coil itself around my ankle. It yanked and I fell. My nose connected with the floor in the aisle, and I heard something crack. I thought that was it. I thought that was the end. But I looked up to see the demonic creature coil its other limb around the girl's neck. It hoisted her from her seat. She screamed as she was lifted toward the indistinguishable figure in the aisle. I couldn't really see what had happened in the darkness, but I'll never forget the sound her body made when it was consumed by the black entity. It sounded like leaves crunching beneath walking boots. I'd almost entirely lost my sense of reality at this point, but some vestige of survival instinct persisted in my fractured mind. I twisted onto my back and looked down at my ankle. I couldn't really see what I was doing in the dark. I just knew I had to act. So, with my free foot, I stomped on the creature's limb, and I stomped as hard as humanly possible. The demon, who had been devouring the poor girl, unleashed an inhuman wail. It pierced my eardrums and shattered every window on the bus. The limb retracted from my ankle and returned to the shadowy being. I seized my opportunity. Catapulting to my feet, I spun around and lunged for the now glassless back window of the bus. Clinging to the frame of the window for dear life, I took one last look at the dark entity that was hurtling towards me. Then I dropped to my feet on the road. I sprinted away from the bus. Adrenaline fueled me onwards. I didn't look back. I just kept running. At the speed I traveled, I think it only took me a few minutes to reach the warm and welcoming lights of civilization. I looked at my phone and cried when I saw that I had service. I booked a taxi. I wanted the furthest possible destination. I chose Manchester, then I took the first train to London. For the past couple of weeks, I've been living in a hotel. I know I was a little late, but I finally took the advice of that online stranger. I moved away. I moved far away. I don't go outside at night, and I definitely don't look out of the window after 3 a.m.
Kara's life was pinwheeling at the edge of a cliff. Soon, it would plummet into an endless freefall. The new baby she and Kevin had hoped would bring them closer together died before taking its first breath of life. The infant was going to be an answer to Kara's silent prayers for a healthy baby girl. When the doctor had informed them that Kara would never again conceive, Kevin decided he was done. Like a dissatisfied customer, he exchanged the damaged product he initially purchased for a better, more reliable one. Unfortunately, in Kara's case, she was the broken item, and Elise was the more attractive alternative. Kara didn't have a husband, child, or life anymore. The daughter she dreamed of having would never feel her mother's warmth, nor hear her lullabies. She was alone in a quiet McMansion with an empty nursery. To occupy her free time, she watched television and emptied several cardboard boxes of wine from Costco's fertile vineyards. One day, overcome by boredom, Kara curled up on the overly expensive leather sofa that Kevin had said they had to have. Setting her glass of wine on the coffee table, she picked up the remote.
So, what's rockin' on Netflix? There's always something good, right?
As she flipped past the TV shows and movies that held no appeal for her, she checked out something a bit more intellectually stimulating. Documentaries. The first few selections didn't impress her. History of the Rolling Stones.
Before my time.
The Roman Aqueduct System.
Who cares?
The 70s in Review.
What were we thinking back then?
She scrolled through several titles until she found one that had potential. The promo pic showed a man assembling a doll. The title was Birth of the Synthetic Child.
Hello, what's this one?
Kara read its synopsis. Skilled artists create them. Collectors purchase them. And childless parents interact with them. This documentary explores the world of realistic, interactive dolls. Kara clicked on the documentary, took a sip of wine, and got comfortable. In the opening scene, a young woman was sitting in a nursery. Everything was in slow motion. She was wearing a flowing white gown and seated in a rocking chair. The soft sunlight streaming in through the room's window cast an ethereal, golden-hued glow. The woman was cradling a newborn. A gentle swirl of calming mood music permeated the setting. The screen cut to a man sitting at a work table. The artisan was weaving hair into a doll's scalp. Sequences of him inserting eyes that opened and shut, along with bending the dolls into lifelike poses, followed this. "These are highly skilled artists who meticulously create realistic babies," the narrator said. "The infants are so rich in their detail that doll collectors buy them by the dozens. Many psychologists claim synthetic replacements can often be therapeutic for women who have lost a child or who cannot conceive." Next came somber interviews with young couples who'd lost an infant. Their poignant stories moved Kara. She held back a cascade of thick tears as she found her heart overtaken with sympathy. However, listening to their happy testimonials about having welcomed a synthetic child into their lives brought about another emotion: hope. Kara noted the company's name, New Birth.
What do you think, girl?
She opened a middle drawer in the coffee table, pulled out a pen and notepad, and jotted down the company's name. Then she laid the information on the coffee table to rest while she gave the idea some thought. After a few days, Kara decided it was time to end her pity party. Before she could change her mind, she marched into Kevin's former home office and fired up the PC. Her hands paused over the keyboard.
Oh, just do it.
She ordered herself. She Googled the company's name and watched the computer's small, colorful wheel spin until it located New Birth's website. The main page displayed a full-screen picture of a sleeping infant nestled in a crib. Kara flipped through a few dozen photos before stopping at a picture of a female doll. Its face, with its look of pure innocence, was mesmerizing. Its fingers were curled and delicate, just like those of a real infant. Enthralled, Kara ran her fingertip over the image, tracing an imaginary line around its bright, open eyes and dark strands of auburn hair. She remembered the soul-deep smiles of young couples in the documentary. She told herself that she wasn't purchasing a toy. She was searching for a daughter.
I know it's weird, but...
Kara moved on to the site's checkout page. She read all the purchasing information as quickly as possible. To her, they were simply words on a page. She was eager to get the critical part, bringing home the baby. Near the end of the purchase agreement, New Birth asked customers to complete a complimentary birth certificate that accompanied each doll. Its purpose was to add an emotional element to the experience. The document requested a name for the newborn. Kara didn't expect this formality. She sat with her lips pursed in thought. Then it hit her. The storage box in the attic. It contained a short list of names she packed away, along with other baby items she could never bring herself to throw out.
The name on the list that caught my attention. Oh, what was it?
She closed her eyes until it popped out as if it were born.
Oh, Amy! Your name is Amy.
The company's shipping schedule stated that the model Kara had chosen was currently out of stock, and it would be a minimum of 6 weeks before they could ship the order. Therefore, the package that greeted her the next morning caught her off guard. Kara wasn't expecting any deliveries, yet there was a small cardboard box at her feet. She searched her mind, making certain that she hadn't forgotten a previous purchase. She hadn't. Someone might have sent her a gift, even though she didn't keep track of her own birthday, so why would anyone else? There wasn't a return label, only her mailing info. An idea sprang to her mind, and she beamed.
Oh, wait, it can't be the doll. Oh, but I bet it is. I wasn't expecting you for a while. I suppose this early arrival qualifies you as a preemie. Oh.
Trembling with anticipation, she took the item inside. Kara toted the package into the dining room and placed it on the table. Then she went into the kitchen, retrieved a pair of scissors from the catch-all drawer, and prepared herself to meet her mail-ordered daughter. Kara thought of a shallow grave when she looked down at the packing peanuts. The thought chilled her. She began clawing to rescue the infant from its cardboard casket. She placed her hands under its arm and yanked it out.
Well, here we are, you and me, so how's about the nickel tour? This is the dining room where we dine. Through there is the living room where we live, and this doorway leads into the kitchen where we kitch.
At the last line, Kara giggled until she snorted.
Excuse me. I haven't heard that sound in ages.
She studied the face of the rubber child.
I'm insane, aren't I? Well, if we're gonna do this, let's go all in, right?
Although awkward at first, she cradled the doll in her arms and began swinging it gently back and forth. Then, looking at its clothes, cringed.
Only a man could pick this outfit. We've got to remedy this once we get you settled in. Oh, let's check out your room.
She carried Amy upstairs and entered the nursery. Everything was just as she and Kevin had left it after they'd decorated. The pleasant morning sunlight cascaded in, minute dust particles dancing rhythmically in its warm rays. It reminded her of the happy young mother in the documentary. Kara sauntered to the rocking chair next to the window, easing herself and the new infant down into its soft comfort. With Amy's head resting on her shoulder, Kara rocked for several minutes before laying the doll inside the crib. Kara stopped and turned. An unexpected peace fell upon her. As hope wrested joy from her marred spirit, returning it to her again and again in endless abundance. Life and love filled her, the closed door of her heart fully open, fully free. She smiled. "Welcome home, baby girl." Kara immersed herself in caring for the doll. The two were becoming inseparable. Feedings, baths, and nursery songs filled her time in a way that lounging in front of the TV couldn't. With Amy snuggled in a papoose, Kara shopped for clothes, toys, bottles, to add to the baby supplies already stored in the attic. She bought formula, as the anatomically correct model could pretend to urinate. Likewise, its eyes and mouths opened based on its position, making feedings possible. The approving glances of the passerby encouraged and amused Kara, as they seemed to enjoy the believable sight of a doting mother carrying her child. Shortly after returning home, Kara placed the bags of baby items on the dining room table, removed one of the new pairs of pajamas, then took Amy to the nursery. After dressing Amy, Kara took a picture with her phone.
Ooh, Mom's girl looks so cute.
She cooed.
I'm gonna get some formula for your tummy, then sing your favorite lullaby. But first, I give you the greatest kiddies band on earth, The Wiggles.
She turned on the CD player and left. Kara went downstairs and began warming the formula in the microwave. She swayed in time with the Wiggles, humming along with their upbeat version of Itsy Bitsy Spider. Suddenly, the song stopped midway through a verse. The house became still and silent. The lone ticking of the wall clock added to its eeriness. Kara went upstairs to check things out. The room was as she'd left it. Was that the end of the CD? She went to the dresser and saw that the player was in the off position. She pressed the play button and the song picked up where it had stopped. Must be defective. Kara hit the stop button and went to the crib.
Did you get tired of the Wiggles? I'm getting a little sick of them, too.
She noticed the onesie pajamas that Amy was wearing appeared tight on her.
What's this all about?
Upon closer inspection, she discovered that the fabric around the wrists and ankles had shortened.
I could have sworn they fit. Next time, check the size, dummy.
Although she'd rationalized the CD and the pajamas, Kara still felt uneasy. To hell with the formula. This tired mama needs to burn off some stress. Kara leaned over the crib.
We'll just hold on to the formula and go straight to the nap, Mustang.
She bent down and kissed the sleeping child on her soft forehead. Then, keeping the nursery neat, she straightened the stuffed toys in the crib.
Sleep tight, Mommy's girl.
she whispered before leaving the room. Kara went downstairs and rode the Peloton for an hour. Afterwards, she went to the kitchen, sliced a grapefruit in half, and sat down for a light lunch. When she finished, she returned upstairs to dress Amy so she could take her to the park and enjoy some fresh air and sunlight. As soon as Kara entered the room, she stopped. Amy was sitting up, her head facing the door. The stuffed toys were scattered across the floor. Kara shivered as her imagination toyed with her. God, please don't let anyone be up here. She worked up the courage and stepped into the hall.
Hey! Is anybody up here? I'm calling the police!
She heard no movement, but waited. Cautiously, she checked upstairs, but found no one.
God, I must be losing my mind.
It took a while for her nervousness to ebb.
Time to get out of this house and relax. But first...
Kara was glad she still had the various-sized clothing that she bought for her natural daughter to grow into. After selecting a few outfits from the attic, she returned to the nursery and dressed Amy. Then they went to the park, a mother and her child. It was a warm June morning, the sun's rays bright but gentle. Kara was sitting on a warm park bench, pushing the baby carriage back and forth, humming with every motion. The sound of fresh summer air tickling the leaves of the surrounding trees, coupled with the joyful squeals of children on swings and merry-go-rounds, creating a soothing symphony of life. I bet the first sound you hear in heaven is the laughter of little children, someone called out, pulling her thoughts back into the woodbench. 2 benches down, a 30-ish looking woman was waving to get her attention. A younger woman was sitting to her right.
Down here!
The older woman said.
I haven't seen you before. Judging by the stroller, I'm guessing you're a new mom?
Yes, I am.
Kara said.
I'm a first-timer. I take it you guys come here often?
Yep, we're 2 of the regulars. I'm Kathy. I own the boy in the Paw Patrol t-shirt and the girl in the chocolate-stained jeans.
The younger woman leaned around her companion.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth. I'm an au pair for the wild child in the overpriced Baby Gap overalls. Hey, it was this job or dog walking?
She joked.
Nice to meet you.
Kara said.
I'm Kara. This is my daughter Amy.
Welcome to our world,
said Mary Beth.
Mind if we take a peek?
Kara hesitated, concerned that the woman would think her odd.
Gee, I don't know. She's napping right now. I don't want to wake her.
We'll be quiet,
said Kathy.
We promise.
Kara tensed, her nerves clawing at her stomach.
I don't know. Once you wake her...
Oh, don't worry,
Kathy assured her.
We're experts at not waking sleeping children. How else will we have any peace?
Mary Beth laughed, shaking her head in agreement. Before Kara could protest again, the woman approached her. They both beamed as they surrounded the stroller. For a few seconds, the authenticity of the doll fooled them. Mary Beth was the first to notice.
What the?
She said.
What is wrong with you? This isn't a real baby.
Let me look,
Kathy said, pulling back the thin pink blanket, concealing the pretend child. Her eyes broadened, a mix of surprise and confusion.
Are you freaking kidding me?
Kara felt the heat of their judgment.
You don't understand.
She huffed.
Look, I know how this appears, but...
As if Kara were an axe-wielding maniac, Kathy backed away.
You need to go,
she said.
All right, I just want to...
I mean now.
Kathy barked. The lively park came to a halt as people watched the commotion. A man who'd been swinging his little boy looked in Kara's direction, suspicion blazing in his glaring eyes. Kara rushed from the park. In the distance, she heard Kathy yell,
You freak!
Kara walked around her neighborhood for hours, hoping the exertion would de-stress her from the grueling and humiliating incident at the park. Remembering the reactions of the park dwellers, she became angry. Who were they to judge? Had they let go of a dream that would never come true? A life without a child? As darkness hovered in the distance, Kara was to the point of tiredness. She parked Amy's carriage in the foyer and carried her upstairs, giving her comforting taps on her back.
Shh, 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 shh. It's all right now, sweet girl.
Kara switched out the doll's outfit for a fresh pair of floral pajamas. After singing and rocking her, Kara went to the kitchen and had a glass of wine. She entered her bedroom, removed her cell phone from her purse, checked her emails. There was only one: new birth. She opened it, thinking it contained additional billing information. Dear Miss Kincaid, we have an update on your order number 62589. Our supplier has informed us it will be an additional 2 weeks before they can ship the product. We apologize for the inconvenience and deeply appreciate your patience. A representative will be in touch as soon as the product becomes available. Most sincerely, Donna James, Regional Sales Manager.
That can't be right.
Kara wondered if she should bother to correct their error. How bad would it be to allow them to send a free sister to join Amy? Her conscience went out.
No sense in letting them think they screwed up.
She wanted to take care of the problem now, so she wouldn't forget.
Dear Mrs. James, thank you for reaching out to me. However, there appears to be a mistake. I received my doll the morning after placing the order on June 9th. Please cancel the shipment. Sincerely, Kara Kincaid.
Kara hit send, then plugged the phone into the charger on her nightstand. After reading a few chapters of a James Patterson novel, she called it a night. She was reaching for the lamp when the phone dinged. She squinted her bleary eyes and saw that she had another email from New Birth. Why are they responding so late? Then she remembered they were on West Coast time. She opened the email. Dear Miss Kincaid, thank you for letting us know about the delivery. However, in correcting our oversight, I found that we have shipped none of these models for a couple of weeks. I checked with our manager in shipping and receiving, and he assures me that his records do not show a shipment of the order. To confirm the status of model H236, he searched our warehouse, but did not find any in stock. Also, we have no record of another model being shipped by mistake. We're not sure where the error lies. In the meantime, I'll cancel the delivery of your doll. Thank you for your patronage. Gratefully, Donna James, Regional Sales Manager.
Don't say I didn't warn you.
Kara felt the urge to look at the pictures she'd taken of Amy earlier. Satisfaction warmed her as she swiped each picture until coming to one shot in particular. Something looked strange with the pajamas. She zoomed in on the onesie. Confusion struck her when she saw it fit the doll. Her neck tingled.
Things are getting weird around here.
Kara wondered if the newness in her life was making her forget things. She was about to get up and settle the matter, but the day had left her so tired that she lacked the energy.
Tomorrow, crazy doll lady.
She muttered.
Tomorrow.
She returned the phone to its charger, switched off the light, and fell asleep thinking of Amy. Kara had been out for hours when a high, whining sound woke her. She lifted her head from her pillow and listened. Silence. Thinking she'd just dreamed it all, Kara dropped her head back to her pillow. She inhaled deeply and let out a long breath, returning to sleep. The noise woke her again. This time she got up to investigate. Kara opened the bedroom door, stuck her head out, and listened. Groggily, she attempted to determine the source of the sound. She considered the air conditioning. Then she wondered if the hall's smoke detector was malfunctioning. A chill coursed through her body as she finally placed the noise. A baby was crying, and the sound was coming from the nursery. Kara drifted dreamlike down the hall, following the wail. The closer she got, the more distressed the weeping became, unnerving her. When she arrived at the nursery's door, she reached for the knob, but was afraid to touch it. Her hand shook. She readied herself, then threw open the door. The room went silent. Adrenaline sharpened her senses, allowing her to think more clearly. This is so crazy. You're just getting too caught up in this fantasy life. The weak glow of the pink elephant nightlight illuminated some of the quiet room. Kara crept to the crib and peeked in. The doll was lying on its back, its eyes closed. To ensure that she'd not taken leave of her senses, Kara poked the infant with her index finger, then snatched it back. She chuckled with relief when nothing sinister happened.
Time to cut back on the old vino.
She joked. Then,
Stupid air conditioner. I'll deal with you tomorrow.
she turned to leave.
Good night, kiddo.
Mommy?
Kara stopped. An icy wave of goosebumps washed over her skin. Her lips quivered. Her legs ceased to work.
Mommy, take me.
Kara remained motionless, adhered to the floor by naked terror.
Mommy! Mommy!
Kara's piercing scream filled the haunted nursery. Horrified, she fled to her bedroom. She slammed the door shut and backed away, tripping over the corner of her bed. Falling backward, her head struck the nightstand, spiraling her into empty darkness. The morning sun streamed through the bedroom window and gradually made its way to Kara's face. She pulled herself up to a sitting position, her tired eyes blinking. She struggled to remember how she'd ended up on the floor. Kara winced as she touched a small lump on the back of her head. She enjoyed a brief respite from the previous night's disturbance before the memory exploded in her frazzled mind.
No.
She mumbled. Once she collected herself, she set about doing the one thing that terrified her most: checking on Amy. The short walk to the nursery felt like a surreal and perpetually stretching journey as her uncooperative feet slid over the hall's thin runner. When she reached Amy's open door, she began panting, an uncontrollable dread constricting her lungs. She peered inside, not sure of what might happen. The protective skirting obscured the view of the inner crib, forcing her to move closer. Frigid sweat moistened her gown. Kara looked inside at the doll. With its clothing ripped away, it resembled a watermelon that someone had tried to force into a banana peel. Amy had grown at least a foot taller. The soft tufts of her auburn hair were now fuller and longer.
What in the world is happening?
She considered running from the house, but she had already convinced enough people she was crazy. A public outburst about haunted dolls would land her in the psych ward.
Oh, God. I've got to do this. I've got to know for certain.
Kara took 3 quavering breaths, then picked Amy up, lifting her to face level. She jerked when its eyes opened.
Amy?
She whispered to the toddler.
Yes, Mommy?
It said through lips that moved stiffly, like a ventriloquist dummy. Kara gasped. Holding the synthetic child, she spoke as calmly as was possible.
What do you want from me?
I need new clothes, Mommy.
It replied in a tender voice.
I'm feeling cold. Oh, and I'm hungry. Very hungry.
It growled. Kara didn't want to panic. She was afraid of what might happen if she tried to run away again. Her voice shook as she spoke.
Tell you what, sweetie, you just lie back down. I'll get you some breakfast and find something to fit you. Then we'll shop for some new clothes.
She returned Amy to her crib and backed out of the room, fearful of turning her back to the possessed toy. Kara went to the kitchen, where we kitch, she remembered. This time she didn't laugh. What could she feed the doll? Would it want solid food? She remembered a box of Honey Nut Cheerios in the pantry. After pouring some into a bowl, she laid it on the high chair's tray. Though her legs wobbled, Kara negotiated the staircase, each step propelling her to the room where the haunted doll sat waiting, hungry, alive. Once there, Kara began dressing Amy in a bigger outfit. Tense with terror, she expected the thing to scream at her or grab her arm. With Amy now clothed, she carried her to the stairs, holding her away from her body as though she were toting a wild, flailing animal.
If this thing talks to me while I'm going down these stairs, I am gonna fall to my death.
Kara was glad that Amy was still small enough to fit in her high chair. How am I supposed to feed solid food to a doll? She pulled in a trembling breath.
Can you chew your food, Amy? Would you rather Mommy fed you some formula?
The doll didn't answer. Its lifeless eyes stared into Kara's. She waited for a response, but none came. The doorbell sent a zap of adrenaline through Kara's body. Her quickened heartbeat thumped in time with her desperate breathing. Despite her fear, it occurred to her that opening the door might provide her with a brief opportunity to escape. She waited for her breath to slow before speaking. As if reading her thoughts, Amy said,
Don't you run away from home, Mommy! That would make me so sad and angry.
Kara shivered. Could the doll somehow follow her? Was it able to strike her dead with a single murderous thought? Was any of this real? She was too terrified to risk escape. Still, she yearned to touch the real world again. The world where humans were humans and dolls were dolls.
Mommy's not going anywhere. I promise.
Kara trotted to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing on the stoop was a young woman dressed in an attractive, thin-strapped summer dress. Kara didn't recognize her. With escape now out of the question, she decided it was best to ignore her and return to the kitchen. Still, she craved a taste of normalcy. If only to assure that she wasn't suffering from a psychotic episode. Kara didn't want to rouse Amy's suspicions, so she prepared herself for answering the door.
Oh, hi.
The woman said pleasantly.
I hope I didn't bother you in the middle of something.
No, not at all. Who are you?
I'm so sorry. My name is Evelyn. And you are?
Kara Kincaid. I'm sorry, what is this about?
Her voice quavered, her nerves betraying her.
Well, first, hi there, Kara. I'm a member of the Macedonia Baptist Church down on Broad Street. I'm just visiting our neighbors in the community to invite them to our worship service. May I ask if you're a believer?
You have no idea what I've come to believe these last few days.
Kara said, a sob getting away from her.
Is everything okay?
Asked Evelyn.
You look pale, sweetie. Maybe I should come back another time when you're...
Oh, no!
Kara yelped. She needed to get a grip on herself, or the woman would leave her alone with whatever was waiting in her kitchen. In a more relaxed tone, she said,
I mean, please, come in. I'd be happy to have a visitor. Things have been a bit unsettling lately. With you being a person of faith, I'd love to get your perspective on something supernatural.
Evelyn felt uneasy.
Oh, I don't think I should offer any advice on...
I'm so sorry. I can see that I've made you uncomfortable. It's a lot to ask of a stranger, but I can use a friend. I need you to... I'd like you to stay for a minute. You can meet my daughter.
Well, okay.
Evelyn said with some hesitation. Upon entering the house, Evelyn looked around carefully, as if she might trigger a trap.
So, how old's your child?
Right now, about 2, I think. Just follow me. She's in the kitchen eating some Cheerios.
Oh, yeah. Kids your daughter's age sure like to nibble on some Cheerios. Say, what'd you mean when you said you think she's about 2?
She grows in a hurry.
Kara tried not to appear frightened.
Come on, she's just in here.
Amy was sitting in her high chair, older and more developed. Her clothes were cutting into her body. She looked about 4 years old, her hair nearly shoulder length. The bowl of cereal was empty. Evelyn stood next to Kara, speechless. She stared at the faux child, then moved her eyes to observe Kara. She couldn't help thinking that she might be one of those unfortunate individuals who find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So, this here is your daughter?
Kara's eyes grew moist, her lips struggling to keep another sob at bay.
Evelyn, let me ask you a serious question. And in return, I'd like your most candid and heartfelt answer.
Okay.
Do you think it's possible to love something into existence? Seriously, think about it. And the Bible says that God breathed life into a mound of dust and created humankind. You know? See, I wanted a baby very much, so I bought this online. And since yesterday, she's gone from being an infant to a preschooler. You think I'm crazy, don't you, Evelyn?
Well, just let me say...
Oh, it's okay. I think I was batcrap crazy too, so... In answer to my question...
Evelyn constructed her response carefully.
I think with God, all things are possible. But listen, Kara, right? You might want to talk to someone else. I could have my pastor put you in touch with somebody who could help you deal with this.
Kara exhaled nervously, shaking her head, then locked eyes with Evelyn.
Come with me. I want to show you something. Don't worry, I won't attack you or anything. I just need to know if I'm the only person who thinks this is real.
Evelyn hesitated. Kara pressed harder.
Please, just let me show you something on the computer. It's the site where all of this began. Just look at it. For my sake. Please, Evelyn.
Okay. Show me the site. I'll help you if I can.
Kara walked to the office with Evelyn trailing behind her. Stepping behind the desk, she turned on the computer. When she arrived at the New Birth website, she waved Evelyn over. Kara flipped through the images until she came across Amy's.
Okay. This is the place where I bought it.
Evelyn pointed at the screen, her brow furrowed.
So you're saying that this...
Then pointing towards the kitchen, said...
Grew into that?
Not only that. Here, check this out. See? Just below the image? It says the company's warehouse is out of stock and that it'll be weeks before they get any more in. Evelyn, she arrived the day after I placed my order. The very next day. Hey, where did it come from? Not from New Birth. They swore they never sent her. Evelyn, with God as my witness, that thing appeared out of nowhere and came alive. It cried at first, then it started talking, and now it's almost ready to start frickin' kindergarten. Do you think you can help me understand what's happening here? I've been through a lot this year, you know? I lost my baby, and my cheating and self-serving husband left me for another woman, and now...
A crash came from the kitchen. Evelyn ran there first, with Kara just behind her. Standing in front of the overturned high chair was a leering, 4-foot-high doll wearing the ragged remains of the clothing that it had been wearing just moments before.
I gotta get out of here!
Evelyn yelled.
No, Evelyn, stay with me!
Kara's desperate pleas echoed through the foyer as Evelyn bolted from the house.
Evelyn!
She hollered again, to no avail. Kara realized she was on her own and would have to save herself. She needed to act fast before the doll became dangerous. Desperate and terrified, she slammed the front door and ran back to the kitchen. Her immediate plan was to grab the doll, throw it down the basement stairs, and lock the deadbolt. She hoped it might buy her enough time to figure out a safe way to destroy it. Upon reaching the kitchen, Kara stopped so abruptly that she skidded and fell. Then she screamed. Evelyn was still distraught when she returned to the house later with Reverend Jones. She hoped he didn't think she was having a nervous breakdown, or worse, high on drugs. She was relieved when, hearing her rambling account of the events, he agreed to help her. Evelyn followed Reverend Jones to the front door of the house. She'd fled in terror. Her breath hitched when he rang the doorbell.
I hope you'll believe me, Pastor. I'm telling you, there's some sort of devil's play going on in this house. Please don't think I'm crazy. I promise you, I'm not. I know I'm not.
Evelyn, Reverend Jones interjected, I never said that you're crazy. I know something happened to you this morning. I just want to sort this out. Look, if it's any consolation, I once Someone unlocking the door interrupted his train of thought. When it opened, Reverend Jones smiled and said, "Hello, ma'am. I'm Reverend Michael Jones from Macedonia Baptist Church. One of my flock, Evelyn here, said that you might require some help. May we come in?"
Oh, now's not the best time, Reverend. I'm in the middle of cleaning up a mess in the kitchen.
I see. Maybe we could stop by when it's more convenient, Ms. Evelyn's face became a petrified mask of horror as the woman with long auburn hair answered,
Amy. Just call me Amy.
The sun makes an unwelcoming appearance as Patrick Fitz wakes to a frozen morning. His head throbs as the first rays of sunlight slice through the parted curtains and reach his retinas, which cause him to growl and turn away. His newly found drinking habit is taking a toll on him, but he doesn't care. He welcomes every headache, every bout of compulsive vomiting, and all the random cuts and bruises that he acquires during his blackouts. He forces himself off the hotel bed and sways as the blood rushes from his head. The feeling is gone almost as fast as it came. He begins looking around the disheveled room for the bottle he had last night, hoping he hasn't finished it. The 1-liter bottle of Royal Club whiskey lays in the bed next to where he had been sleeping. The top is off, resulting in the darkening of the beige bed sheets. He frowns, picks it up, and sees it contains roughly 4 mouthfuls. Gotta catch the hair of that dog. He takes a drink. It tastes stale. His short, oily brown hair stands matted and alert in all directions. He still wears the button-up red plaid shirt he had dug out of the dirty clothes trash bag yesterday. It had been, and still is, covered in wrinkles. Luckily, his coat and a few squirts of Axe body spray will mask the musty smell radiating off him. His jeans are dusty, but clean enough for him to wear for a few more days unless he falls in a mud puddle. He remembers Janice Storm, the sexy blonde weather lady who he thinks made up her last name to fit her occupation, saying it wasn't supposed to rain or snow for a few more days. Luck is in his favor for once. He finds the top to the bottle, twists it on, and goes about his morning duties. Shit, no shower, no shave. Though he is looking a bit rugged, no dental cleansing, and speedy quickly with himself involving the shower he has turned on to wash away his never-future children. He cleans off his hands and manhood with a damp rag and then finishes up with a few squirts of body spray to his armpits and the front of his shirt. He leaves the cramped bathroom, snatches his brown Carhartt coat off the single chair next to the window, tugs it on, then slips into his Wolverine steel-toed work boots and takes one more drink from the bottle before hiding it under his coat as he departs. He stands in an aisle at his local hardware store looking at fumigation chemicals, insecticides, and rodent poisons. One would do the trick, he thinks, as he picks up a yellow box of rat poison pellets. The front shows a picture of a dead rat laying on its back, along with a red toxic warning label. The back gives safety directions for someone who has ingested it, along with the number for the Center for Disease Control. It also claims that in California, it had been proven to cause cancer. According to California, everything causes fucking cancer. I wish that was the only thing I had to think about. So how should I do this? Crush them up, mix them in with some food? That's what they do on TV, and it always seems to do the trick. He sighs and places the box back on the shelf. Sleeping pills. Sleeping pills are the best way to go. Take a full bottle, lights out for eternity. Painkillers? CO poisoning? A hose from the tailpipe through the window into the cab. Hear that's like falling asleep. He wipes a tear racing down his right cheek, then looks around to see no one. He pulls the bottle of whiskey from his coat and takes a mouthful. He wipes away another tear as he returns the bottle and heads to the exit. God, why did you do this to me? The cashier, a blonde teen, looks to be just a year or two older than his son, glares at him as he shoves out the front door. He isn't sure if the stare was derived from sympathy or disgust, But does it really matter? Go ahead and stare. Take a good look at what a man wishing to die but is too cowardly to try looks like. Take it in, boy. Study it. Hate it. And hope and pray it never finds you. The whole town knows of his pain. How could they not? Crest Hill has a population of 1,768, and when something bad or distasteful happens, the people dive headfirst into the gossip orgy. The same day of a person's misfortune, the town knows all the secrets, storylines, and details, some of which are new news to the very person they are orgasming over. He sways down the sidewalk of Main Street, the only commercial street in town, where his hotel room and the liquor store are just a short distance away from one another. Dollar General is the only corporate store in town. All the others are family-owned. The only mechanic shop / gas station / fast food place is the Conoco, a mile outside city limits on Highway 1. That strip of asphalt lets travelers bypass this rinky-dink town without ever knowing of its existence, and most do. He passes by a few other stores, flea market, barber shop, and laundromat. I need to go there this afternoon, he says to himself, his breath visible in the frigid morning air. Frost is still visible on the light poles where the sun's radiation has yet to touch. The liquor that's still in his blood from last night, coupled with the fresh dose in his stomach, keeps him warm, keeps him from sinking to his knees to confront reality. It numbs him, lets his mind wander, and at times go blank. When he passes out for hours on end, or is regurgitating it back out, his thoughts are empty, and that's the way he wants them. If he can stay empty and numb, there will be no more pain, no more sadness, no more regret or self-hatred. He stops and looks through the plate glass windows that make the front wall of Jimmy's Pharmaceuticals. Where do you keep your sleeping pills? The morbidly obese brunette pharmacist, Susan Jenkins, sits behind the counter reading a romance novel. She had gotten knocked up by their fellow classmate, Thomas Matthews, during their senior year of high school, when she was 200 pounds lighter. They got married a week after graduation and have 3 more wonderful children over the past 15 years. She goes to take a sip of her coffee on the counter beside her when she notices him staring. She gives him a faint smile, then takes a sip of her coffee, sits it back down, and gives him a slight wave. He can see it in her eyes. You think you understand the pain, the sorrow, the guilt. I should have gone with her. I should be with them now. Dead. She swerved too hard. I would have done differently. I would have kept control of the car. Maybe they wouldn't be gone if I would have gone. Maybe we would have left at a different time. Maybe we would have left earlier. Maybe later. I should have been more authoritative. I told Becky I wanted the night to ourselves. We wanted another child. He sees her eyes turn, brow pinch, and face turn to sadness before he realizes tears are cascading down his face. He turns, wipes them away, and hurries down the sidewalk a few more paces before cutting across the empty street. Walking up the concrete steps of the liquor store, he guzzles the last 2 mouthfuls of whiskey and then tosses the glass bottle into the trash bin next to the entrance door. The built-in sand trap atop is filled with cigarette butts. He pushes the glass door open. A bell chimes, alerting the inhabitants of his entering. We're not open for another 10 minutes, Travis, the burly gray-haired man, tells him, not bothering to turn around to formally address him. He is arranging the bottles that line the shelf behind the counter. The orange vest and camouflage jacket he wears tells Patrick he was supposed to be hunting right now and not taking the shift of an employee who has apparently called in. Can you make an exception, please? Travis turns, his face slowly turning into a frown. What do you want? A bottle of the strongest sleeping pills you got. A pint of Royal Club. You sure you don't want a 5th? He questions as he turns and plucks a plastic bottle from the bottom shelf. You know you will just be back for more and end up getting picked up by the police again. He scans its barcode before placing it on the counter. If you stay this course, they're going to end up keeping you in there and force you into a treatment program. Patrick wipes his cheeks, making sure his eyes aren't still leaking. "It is what it is," he replies as he places a crinkled $10 bill on the counter. The old man takes the crunched up bill. He taps a few keys on the register, releasing the cash drawer. He retrieves his change and hands it to him. "Get out of here," he tells him before he begins straightening the bottles again. He leaves and retraces his steps as he heads to the clearly visible bright yellow Dollar General logo at the opposite end of the street. He has to restock his non-perishable microwavable food items. He twists the top off the bottle. The crunch of the seal breaking gives him a shiver of excitement. He coughs as the liquor reaches his chest, but rejoices when its warmth finds his stomach. This is much better than the stale stuff left over from last night. Slowing his walk, he takes a deep breath, letting the cold air ease the burning of his throat. Letting the air out, he raises the bottle back to his lips. Euphoria. The sound of a vehicle creeping up behind him makes him take the bottle prematurely from his mouth. He checks over his shoulder and sure enough, it's a patrol car. He swiftly spins the top on and tucks it into the inside pocket of his coat. Over the past few weeks, he has been taken to the station and put in the drunk tank 3 times. They never bother citing him for public intoxication. They all pity him. He knows he will be picked up again if they get their hands on him, so he opens the next door he comes to and slips inside. The hinges of the dark old oak door creak as he enters. From its small circular window, he watches the patrol car slowly creep closer. The patrol car comes to a stop in front of him. The driver's window rolls down. Patrick's breath is fogging the glass as he looks into the eyes of a stranger. He knows all 4 of the cops in town, and this man is not one of them. He is ghostly pale, has bright green eyes, bleach blonde hair, and is smiling ear to ear. He sticks half of his body out the window and gives Patrick an overzealous wave. He wears a green suit with orange pinstripes, an orange dress shirt underneath, and a green bow tie around his neck. "I hope you have a fine and dandy time," the stranger gleefully yells at him. "You probably won't, but that's just life, ain't it? All shits and giggles without any of the giggles, eh? Well, I better be on my way. And remember, make good life choices and always choose your words wisely. Doodly-doo." He gives another enthusiastic wave before slipping back into the car. The lights begin to flash as the siren begins to blare. The tires spin and squall as he speeds off.
"Welcome."
An old cranky woman's voice greets him from behind. He sighs and tries to open the door to leave, but the knob won't turn. He tries again with both hands, but it doesn't budge.
"Sorry, sugar, but that handle only works when it wants to."
"Ever thought about changing the damn thing?" he replies as he strains to turn the knob.
"It ain't going to work,"
the old woman tells him. "Then how do I get out?" he asks as he turns to face the voice behind him. The room is dim. A single light bulb hangs over a heavy mahogany door that stands in the middle of the floor. In the far corner, a dark-skinned elderly woman sits rocking back and forth in a wooden chair. A black and red checkered quilt lies over her legs. The black pipe she is puffing on creates a gray cloud that obscures her face, leaving only her straight white hair visible. A cast-iron wood burning stove stands a few feet from her.
"You're fine in here,"
she says.
"I tend to have a couple of drinks myself when I feel the need to, so by all means."
He pulls the bottle from his coat and takes in his elixir. "So, how do I get out of here?" She points toward the door in the middle of the room.
"Through there."
"You're going senile." The woman shakes her head.
No, I don't think so. At least not yet."
He walks to the door, turns the bronze knob and pulls it open, revealing the opposite wall that is made of the same old oak as the other 3 walls and the doors. "Lady, I'm not in the mood for jokes."
"And I am not a jester,"
she replies.
"Your only chance of escape is through that door."
He points at the door knife-handedly and with an aggravated voice states, "There is nothing through that fucking door."
"How do you know? You haven't tried it,"
she tells him. He rolls his eyes before taking a mouthful from his bottle and then returns it to his coat. Okay, I'll play your stupid game. He swiftly swings the door open and steps forward. His boots crunch on gravel. Ahead is a moonlit highway and beyond it a forest. He looks back to see a forest has taken the place of the room he has left. A brisk fog comes from his mouth as he curses. What the fuck is this shit? Headlights appear on the highway to the right of him. They are too far away for him to hear the vehicle. Off in the distance to his left, but close enough to discern the difference between firecrackers and gunshots, somebody is letting out a rapid burst of lead. A single headlight rounds the curve, speeding away from that direction. It is swaying back and forth on the highway. The vehicle to the right is getting closer. He has to try and stop one of them before the worst happens. Stepping onto the edge of the asphalt just before the white line, he begins waving his arms to get the attention of the vehicle with the two headlights. He's confident the driver will see him. The full moon is bright. He can hear the vehicle now, but it shows no signs of slowing. The headlights are actually getting closer to his side of the road. He begins yelling at them to stop moments before he has to dive away onto the gravel shoulder. The driver of the dark SUV slightly weaves, but overcorrects too hard, sending it swerving uncontrollably. Moments later, the one headlight crashes into the side of the SUV near its rear tires, sending the vehicle tumbling. A body is flung high into the air before the vehicle crashes into the trees. The descending body splashes onto the asphalt. The sudden calamity deafens all his senses. He has only felt this way once before, and that had been the worst day of his life. His hands are shaking as he reaches for his bottle. The large mouthful makes him cough. The scene, lit by the full moon, seems all too familiar to him. This isn't possible. He runs to the wreckage. He slows at the first vehicle to see the one headlight that once guided it is now just another piece of the crushed carnage that's the front of the silver Chevrolet S10 truck. The front is hissing and steaming as the busted radiator pours out its contents. The driver's side window is shattered. Mark's lifeless head is leaning slightly out of the window, his dead eyes looking up to the full moon. His nose is gone. In its place is a fleshy void where chips of bone and flesh cling to what skin is left. Blood coats the bottom of his face. Patrick can't comprehend how someone with this type of injury could survive long enough to drive anywhere. A slight moan from the body on the asphalt regains his full attention. He sprints to the woman's side and is horrified by what he sees. Her body is twisted like a pretzel. Her jeans have been pulled from her. Her right leg is covered in deep bleeding gashes. Her left is dislocated at the hip, causing her foot to be laying next to head. He can barely make out his wife's face. Most of the flesh has been ripped away, along with part of her scalp. The rest is somewhere among the wreckage. The only obvious detail telling him that it is his wife is the sweater she is wearing, though now it's nothing more than a tether of white cotton. It barely covers her breast. It is her favorite one, and was the one she was wearing the night she left. Her one eye that has not been torn away opens and looks up at him and whispers, "Patrick." He kneels beside her, taking her bloodied hand. Tears are cascading down his face. "I'm here, baby. Don't try to talk. You're going to be okay. Help is on its way." "Bobby," she whispers. "He's okay," he lies. He knows his son died from a broken neck during the crash. She gives a slight smile as she takes her last breath. Headlights appear from the direction his wife had come. That would be Crystal. A dark oak door with a bronze handle appears behind him. It opens, letting out a shadowy human-like creature that swiftly wraps its arms around him and pulls him through the door before he can let out a scream. It slams shut and disappears. The door before the old woman opens. Patrick comes tumbling back through the darkness beyond the door, thudding his back against the wall 6 feet away from her. "What the fuck was that?" he yells as he hurries up off the floor. He wipes his face to remove the tears before reaching for his bottle. The woman is still clouded in a haze of smoke.
It was your way of escape.
"Escape my ass! I just watched my wife and son die!" He takes a drink.
Isn't that why you're in this room? Isn't that why you took the drink? Isn't that why you're trapped? Not only here, but in your own mind.
She removes the pipe from her mouth and taps it on the arm of the chair, causing a fine dust of ash to fall to the floor.
I'm giving you the chance to change the worst day of your life, so you can escape this hell. You have 5 chances left, so choose what you intend to do wisely.
She reaches back under the quilt, retrieves a lighter, and lights up before returning it back to its hiding spot. So you're telling me I have to relive that night 5 more times? He grumbles.
Yes.
She replies as she gives her pipe a puff. Her face is once again hidden.
Or you can sit here, drink your bottle, and die of malnourishment. It's up to you. To me, it makes no difference.
So how exactly does this work? He asks as he takes a step towards the door.
Just think of what you need to do, and the door will guide the way. But know this, you cannot appear in the same place or time twice, or too far from the actions that brought you here.
I have to stop that truck, he says as he opens the door and walks back through. Once again, his boots crunch on gravel, but this time he stands under a streetlight. A half-mile to his right, a gas station is lit up like a beacon for weary travelers. Its red and white Conoco sign stands glowing high above the highway. To his left, he can see 2 headlights speeding towards him. The vehicle flashes under a streetlight, revealing the silver Chevrolet truck. He steps out onto the highway to stop him, but the truck never slows or veers. He tries to move but isn't quick enough, and the truck's passenger side slams into him, sending him spinning and slamming onto the gravel shoulder. He screams in agony. He looks down at his legs to see his jeans begin to darken with blood and the tip of a bone sticking through his jeans on his right leg. He averts his eyes from them to see the truck pull into the gas station as the door appears in front of him and opens. The dark, shadowy creature quickly snags a hold of one of his broken legs and yanks him through the door. He rolls back into the room. The door slams shut behind him. He expects to be in agony, but is relieved to find his legs are in full working order. He stands, takes a quick step, reaches for the doorknob, but then halts. He pulls his bottle and takes a drink as he begins to think of his next move. He tries to remember every detail of the newspaper article he read 2 months ago. The truck stopped at the gas station like last time. I heard the shots. Mark robbed the place and got a little more than he bargained for. So what the fuck should I do? Try to stop Mark from robbing the place, or try and stop the clerk from shooting him? If I stop Mark, then I will save the clerk's life and my family's. He turns the knob and walks through the door. He steps for the 3rd time onto gravel, but this time it's the parking lot beside the gas station. Usually there would be a couple of 18-wheelers staying the night out here, but not tonight. He watches Mark get out of his truck wearing a black hoodie, what looks like a black beanie, and a pair of black gloves. He walks to the front of his truck to inspect the damage he had just taken. Patrick hears Mark curse when he sees his busted grill and headlight. Patrick makes it to the lights illuminating the fuel pumps just as Mark is pulling the black ski mask, that Patrick thought was a beanie, over his face. "Hey man, you don't want to do that," Patrick says as he walks up to him with his hands raised to show that he is no threat to him. Mark pulls a silver revolver from his hoodie pocket and points it at his chest. "Go fuck yourself," he tells him and fires a round into his chest. Patrick collapses onto the concrete. Suddenly, it's hard for him to breathe. He watches Mark go into the store as he gasps for air. The door appears in front of him. The creature leans out from the darkness beyond its threshold, grabs his arm, and quickly pulls him in. He slides across the floor as the door slams behind him. He gasps for air.
3 down, 3 to go,
the woman says as she rocks back and forth, the chair squeaking. He lies still for a few minutes, taking deep breaths. He's pissed off. First he hits me with his truck, and now he shoots me in the chest. He snaps. He rises and walks through the door only to still be in the room. The woman softly laughs and reminds him,
not at the same place or the same time.
He slams the door, takes another drink from his bottle. He has a good buzz. He thinks for a brief moment before opening it again. This time he steps onto the linoleum floor of the gas station. He's at the back wall in front of the coolers that refrigerate the drinks. In front and one aisle over from him, Mark is at the register making his demands. Patrick quickly walks up the aisle towards him. "Hurry the fuck up!" Mark shouts as the middle-aged Hispanic man shoves what he has into a large round plastic jar on the counter. Patrick rounds the end of the aisle and steps on the strips of plastic-wrapped beef jerky that were once in the jar that's now being filled with what change the clerk has. A few coins drop to the counter, dinging as they bounce from it onto the floor. "Go fuck yourself," he mocks as he punches Mark in the side of the face. The gun goes off. Mark and the clerk fall. Patrick goes to kick him, but Mark quickly raises the gun and sends a round through his neck and out the back of his skull. Darkness. He's lying face up on the floor next to the old woman when he wakes. He lays there, realizing that his anger is not going to help his situation. It's best to stay still until he can calm down and start thinking straight again. He pulls out his bottle, which is half full, and takes a sip. He would stop drinking, but knows that will give him a headache and cause his hunger to grow more than it already is. It's best to stay at the level he is now. No more, no less. He lays back, going over his next plan of attack. Not at the same place and not at the same time. What other options do I have? If I appear at the pumps as he comes out, he'll just shoot me again. I gotta be across the highway. I have to stop the clerk. There's no other option now. He makes that shot before he dies. Mark didn't realize he wasn't dead before he ditched the gun. The police found it across the highway from the station. If I can get that gun, then I can kill the clerk before he kills Mark. Then Mark can swerve out of the way. She might still crash into the woods, but it might give them a chance to live. I have to kill the clerk. He takes 20 minutes to regain his composure and rises focused. He looks at the door with determination and then walks through. His boots crunch on leaves as he steps to the edge of the tree line opposite the station. He's expecting to see Mark speeding away and the clerk standing in the doorway emptying the 17-round magazine of his Glock 45. Instead, he sees Mark run out of the gas station carrying the jar full of money. He makes it to his truck and throws a revolver over the roof. It skids across the highway and rolls onto the graveled shoulder. Patrick takes a few steps forward and picks up the gun. It's heavy in his hand. He hasn't shot a pistol since he was a teenager. Mark slams his truck door closed and cranks the engine. Patrick instinctively ducks as a shot rings out. The silver S10 juts forward. Another shot rings out, hitting the side of the truck. He has a clear sight of the clerk who is slumped in the doorway. The front of his light yellow polo shirt is covered in blood. Another shot rings out but misses entirely. Patrick grips the pistol tightly with both hands, raises, and fires. He misses. Another shot rings out. Then another. The clerk's bullet hits the tailgate. Patrick fires again, shattering the glass window next to the clerk. He can tell he doesn't know where the gunshots are coming from because he's still shooting at Mark. Another shot rings out from the clerk's pistol. The passenger side mirror explodes. This time he cocks the hammer back himself and concentrates. Another shot. Another. They all miss. He fires again. The clerk drops to his knees. Mark is just about to round the corner when the clerk releases another shot. The back windshield of the S10 shatters a moment before it disappears around the corner. Behind him, the door appears again and he is yanked through. The revolver drops to the ground as it reaches the darkness at the door's threshold. A few moments later, a boom erupts as the vehicles crash into each other. The door opens. Patrick is shoved out of the darkness and into the room. The door slams shut behind him. His chin is nestled to his chest. He feels beaten.
Sugar, don't feel so down,
the woman tells him.
You still have another chance to make things right.
No, I don't, he replies as he pulls the bottle from his coat and sits down against the wall facing the door. He slowly twists the bottle off and throws it at the door. He watches it bounce off and land in front of him. It spins before it topples to a stop. He takes in a mouthful and then begins sobbing. He sits, drinks, and cries until the bottle is empty. Then he just cries. 10 minutes later, the cadence of his crying is broken.
You still have one more chance left, sugar.
The woman assures him as she empties her pipe and goes through her routine of loading it and firing it back up. He's rightfully drunk now. What should I do? At what time? Have I not been there? He stands and walks through the door. Nothing happens. He walks through again. Nothing happens. Again. What the fuck do I do? He screams as he continues to pace back and forth through the door. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
It's all up to you, sugar. Only you know the worst day of your life.
That is the worst day of my life, and I fucking caused it all. It adds up. Everything that happened was because of me. Because I'm a drunk. Because I came into this fucking building. Because I walked through that fucking door. The door slams shut behind him. He stops, wipes the tears from his face, turns, opens it. I wish I never walked through this door, he whispers, then disappears through it. The bright light causes him to squint as his boots step onto the front porch of his country house. As his eyes adjust, he sees his wife's pristine raven black 92 Ford Bronco next to his dusty red 86 Dodge Ram. Beyond them and across the highway stands the remains of tan corn stalks that had been cut a few weeks prior. He realizes he's sober and that he's home. He had left this place the day after the deaths of his wife and son. He couldn't stay here. Too many good memories and thoughts of what could have been just made him more depressed and suicidal than he already was. The smell of his wife's Calvin Klein perfume makes his knees weak. A hand grabs his ass as lips press against his cheek. She trots past him and down the steps gracefully in her white cotton sweater. Her straight brown hair floats in the wind behind her. We will probably be back around 11 tonight, so don't wait up. Unless you want to try for another one. She winks and blows him a kiss before she opens the door of the Bronco. Wait, I'm going with you, he blurts out, almost screaming the words. She smiles. That's fine, but you better hurry and get changed. And call the mill and tell them you won't be coming in tonight. Right, he says, and then aggressively tells her, I'm driving. She mouths a silent, okay reply and waves her hands, gesturing to him to go get ready.
Don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
That's what my dad used to tell me when I was a kid. I never really understood the metaphor back then. I mean, I knew what he was getting at. He thought I was overreacting. The crying, the shouting, the self-harm, all of those were mountains, as far as he was concerned. The molehills? I don't talk about the molehills. For a long time, though, I didn't even know what a molehill was. It stood to reason that a molehill was smaller than a mountain. Otherwise, the saying wouldn't have made any sense. But I had only ever heard the word used in that phrase, never in any other type of conversation. I had no context for it, no frame of reference. I wasn't even sure if that was the word my dad was saying. I thought maybe it was like a misheard song lyric, like when people hear Jimi Hendrix say, "Excuse me while I kiss this guy," instead of, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky." One night when I was 8 years old, I asked my half-sister Delilah what a molehill was. She was 3 years older than me, so I figured she might know. She stopped dabbing the blood from my lip and gave me a puzzled look.
They're everywhere, stupid. Everywhere? Where?
She rolled her eyes and sighed like the answer was the most obvious thing in the world.
Everywhere, everywhere. In the yard, behind the house, in the woods, everywhere.
I peered out the window at the ground outside our trailer home. It was rippled with small mounds of dirt, ranging in size from half a grapefruit to half a basketball. I had seen them my whole life. but I had no idea what they were.
Those out there? Yep.
She balled up the bloody tissue and tossed it into the trash can beside the bed, then licked her thumb and wiped a smear of dried blood from my chin.
Why are they called molehills? Seriously?
Delilah asked. I nodded. She looked me in the eyes, her tone like that of a teacher explaining basic facts to a particularly thick-headed student.
Because they're hills, made by moles.
I didn't know what a mole was either. Delilah explained that it was like a rat, but instead of living in our trash, it lived underground, digging tunnels and occasionally popping up through the ground to breathe. I don't know if that last part was true, but it made sense to me at the time. I found the whole concept of moles fascinating.
What do they eat?
I asked. Delilah shrugged.
I don't know. Dirt, I guess.
As I got older, the molehills got bigger. The mountains got bigger too. The crying turned to drinking, the self-harm into self-destruction. I realized that if I didn't get away from my father, I wasn't going to make it through high school alive. Either my dad was going to kill me, or I was going to kill him. Or both. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I ran away. I got sober, I got a GED, I got a job, and eventually I got better. So much better, in fact, that I never thought about my dad anymore. I never thought about the mountains. Or the molehills. Until today. Today, Delilah called. We had kept in touch here and there over the years, but it had been at least a decade since we last spoke. She told me she was moving to Alabama with her new boyfriend and that someone needed to assume responsibility for our father's care once she was gone. The old man required a pharmacy's worth of meds, multiple times a day. He couldn't be trusted to figure out which meds to take when, and the wrong combination at the wrong times could kill him. So, it fell upon my shoulders to help. At first I said, hell no. I couldn't imagine returning to that place after so many years. But Delilah persisted, and eventually, I gave in. I felt some perverse sense of responsibility that I couldn't explain. The man was my father, after all. He was aging, decrepit, senile, a pathetic shell of his former self. He wasn't the same man he was when I ran away. That's what Delilah told me anyway. And, like an idiot, I believed her. Delilah met me outside our father's trailer just before nightfall, her dented pickup truck creaking to a stop beside my old Toyota Corolla. I had been parked in the gravel driveway for almost an hour, with my foot on the brake and the gear shift on R, staring at a dent in the side of the mold-streaked trailer and trying to will myself to stay. Delilah crossed in front of my car and waved at me through the windshield.
You coming?
Her voice was muffled through the closed windows. I didn't respond.
Earth to Bonnie.
She slapped her palm on the hood of my car. The sound made me flinch. So I uncurled my aching fingers, put the gear shift in park, and killed the engine. It rattled and sputtered for a moment, then fell silent with a final hiss. I took a deep breath and opened the car door. Hey, I said, as I stepped out onto the driveway.
Hey yourself,
she replied with a smirk. Her eyes wandered down my body and then back up to my face. Long time. You good? We'll see. I looked up at the trailer, and the faded curtain in the window over the sink seemed to move just an inch, as if someone had been peeking out. I'm good too, she said sardonically. Thanks for asking. She walked up the 3 rotted wooden stairs to the trailer, opened the door, and stepped inside. Hi, Dad, I heard her say. Guess who's here? My stomach lurched at the thought of going into the trailer. It was dirtier and more mildewed than the night I ran away. But otherwise, nothing had changed. It had the same faded Confederate flag sticker in the window, the same tin Miller Lite sign hanging crooked on a rusty screw by the door, and the same pine tree loomed overhead, dumping dead pine needles and sticky sap all over the roof and steps. It was only then that I noticed the molehills. The ground was infested with them. I could have sworn that the yard had been smooth and flat when I pulled into the driveway, but it wasn't anymore. Mounds of wet earth pimpled the landscape in all directions. The mound closest to my car roiled with a mass of squirming earthworms, crumbs of wet earth sticking to their slime-slicked bodies. Delilah poked her head back outside the trailer.
Psst, Bonnie, let's go.
Sorry. Coming. I picked my way through the minefield of molehills until I reached the steps of the trailer. I followed Delilah into the dimly lit den, and the screen door swung shut behind me with a familiar smack.
Look who it is, Dad!
Delilah exclaimed. She moved aside so my father and I could see each other. I suppressed a gasp. The last time I saw my dad, he was a hulking beast of a man, with muscled forearms covered in fading greenish-black tattoos from his time in the army. He had broad shoulders and a straight spine, with a head of thick, wavy brown hair and a clean-cut reddish mustache that reminded me of the guy from the brawny paper towels package. The figure before me, however, was nothing like that. He was a mere shadow of the man I knew. He was wearing the same kind of flannel shirt he favored when I was a kid, but now it hung on him like a scarecrow costume draped over a Halloween skeleton. His thinning gray hair stood up in crazy swirls, the color of dryer lint. A dusting of unkempt stubble dirtied his hollow cheeks, making him seem even more emaciated than he already was. His eyes were covered with milky cataracts that dulled his pale blue irises to a ghostly gray. He sat slumped in a sunken recliner scarred with rows of long cigarette burns on the arms. A Hungry Man microwave dinner, a tall can of Miller Lite, and a kaleidoscope of pills in a small paper cup were arranged on the rolling tray in front of him. He leaned forward and squinted his eyes.
"Who's that?"
he grumbled. I looked at Delilah. She raised her eyebrows at me and tilted her head toward my father, indicating that I should answer. It's me, Dad. Bonnie. I paused, waiting for him to answer or react in any way. He didn't. After an awkward moment, I cleared my throat and asked, how are you feeling?
Like dirt.
He sat back and returned his attention to the TV. With one shaking hand, he picked up the plastic fork on his tray, stabbed a sliver of lukewarm turkey, and shoved it into his mouth. Gravy dripped down his chin and onto his shirt.
Bonnie's going to be helping you set your pills from now on,
Delilah said, her voice raised to be heard over the shouting from the TV.
Once I'm gone.
My father took a swig of beer from his can, straining it through his teeth before swallowing it.
Mm-hmm.
His eyes remained fixed on the screen. I gave Delilah a pleading look. I should go.
You hush,
she replied.
He'll be fine once he comes around.
She tugged my sleeve toward the tiny kitchen.
Let me show you the pills.
For the next 15 minutes, Delilah went through the medication plan in scrupulous detail. Each pill was carefully portioned into a plastic box, sectioned by days of the week and parts of the day. Morning, noon, evening, and night. A system designed to ensure that the right pills were taken at the right times.
The box had to be refilled every Sunday with enough pills for the week. All I had to do was follow the paper that indicated which meds went into which section. As long as I did that, Delilah explained, everything would be fine. I tried to concentrate on what she was saying, but I couldn't seem to focus. There was a noise coming from under the trailer, a sort of crunching sound that reminded me of someone chewing a mouthful of unpopped popcorn kernels. I imagined dozens of moles digging through the ground just under my feet, erupting into the night air in miniature explosions of mud and grass. I imagined their flat gray bodies, their wide pink hands, their long yellow claws. They were coming for me, coming to pull me through their tunnels and into their lair, where they would climb over me, hundreds of them, squirming blindly across my face, over my belly, through my hair, into my mouth. Hey! Delilah snapped her fingers in front of my face.
Are you even listening to me?
I blinked the nightmarish vision out of my head. Yeah, I nodded. Follow the paper. Got it.
You don't even need to talk to him, if you don't want to,
Delilah said, reassuringly.
You can just pop in, fill the pills, and pop out. Easy peasy.
And he knows what to take when? Delilah nodded.
He's pretty good about it. Sometimes he forgets, but it's not the end of the world. We just don't want him to take too much. Hence, the box.
She tapped one of her ragged fingernails against the plastic lid.
As long as everything in here is right, he'll be fine.
Bonnie!
My heart leapt into my throat at the sound of my father's voice shouting from the other room. Fear exploded in my chest. But then I remembered that I was a full-grown adult, and he was a shriveled old man. There's nothing to be afraid of, I told myself. He can't hurt you anymore. I poked my head out of the kitchen.
Yes, Dad?
Come over here.
Did you need something?
Just come.
He held his hand out toward me, and I reluctantly crossed the stained carpet to his chair. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing, then took my hand in his.
How old are you?
45.
45.
He repeated. His grip tightened, the tip of his thumb prodding painfully at the fragile bones in the back of my hand. I made a small whimpering sound. Stop! I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip was shockingly strong for someone who looked so frail. His gaze returned to mine, his lips twisted into a smile, revealing teeth blackened with nicotine and decay.
Welcome home.
The screen door slammed behind me as I stormed out of the trailer and down the steps towards my car. Hot tears filled my eyes. Delilah followed me, rushing to catch up.
Wait!
No way. Forget it. I'm not fucking doing it. I stopped at my car and dug around in my purse, fumbling for my key fob while I continued ranting. I can't believe I let you talk me into coming back here. I flung my purse into the car, then climbed into the driver's seat. Delilah followed me, blocking the door from closing with her sizable frame.
Move!
I shouted.
You can't go.
The hell I can't. I'll run you over right here if you don't get out of my way.
Then do it.
Delilah glared down at me intensely.
Fucking do it. I dare you.
I closed my eyes, smacked the back of my skull against the headrest, and pounded my hands on top of the steering wheel.
Fuck!
I screamed.
Fuck! 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 Oh, fucking hell.
My heart thudded against my chest like a toddler kicking the back of an airplane seat during a tantrum. Delilah stared down at me with a smirk. "You finished?" I wiped the tears from my cheeks with my hands, then nodded. Delilah fished a set of keys from the purse dangling against her hip. "Good. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to take this." She worked a key off of her key ring and held it out to me. "You're going to show up here next Sunday and every Sunday after that. And you're going to set us pills. Got it?" I took the key and nodded. "Got it," I said quietly. "And don't think I won't be checking in. Daddy might not be all there anymore, but he knows enough to tell me if you haven't been around." I sniffed and nodded again. "Can I go now?" I whispered. "Sure can," Delilah said with faux cheeriness. She slammed my door with a thud. "Drive safe!" The road back to my apartment from my father's trailer was a long, lonely one. The majority of the 90-minute trip was spent navigating a winding 2-lane highway through the Pine Barrens. It had been 30 years since I had last traveled that route. 30 years since I ran from that trailer, hitched a ride from a farmer in an old Ford pickup, and never looked back. As I drove around the bend near where I had flagged down the Ford, a flash of color in the dark caused me to quickly shift my foot from the gas to the brake. A man in a reflective orange vest was standing in the middle of the road about 100 yards away. He raised a handheld stop sign and motioned my car over to the side of the highway. A few feet behind the man, giant hills of crumbled asphalt were piled across both lanes of the blacktop. At first, I was grateful that the guy had stopped me. If I had hit one of those piles at the speed I was going, my car probably would have gone airborne like something from a Michael Bay movie, tumbling end over end until it exploded in a ball of flames. It wasn't until I had already steered onto the narrow shoulder and rolled to a stop that I began to realize how risky it was for me to pull over. I was a woman, driving by myself, down a deserted highway in the middle of the night, in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere. I was completely and utterly alone. There were no workers, no construction vehicles, no traffic cones. Or lights, I realized. There are no goddamn lights. Nighttime construction was usually accompanied by a roaring generator powering giant floodlights that lit up the area like a football stadium. But in this case, the road was eerily quiet and completely dark. The only light, other than my headlights, came from a thin sliver of moon that was barely visible behind a thick bank of clouds. The man was working in near total darkness. The man's jaw churned as he chewed a thick wad of what I assumed to be tobacco. He spat a stream of dark saliva onto the ground, then lowered his stop sign and began trudging toward my car. He wore mud-streaked jeans and a filthy white t-shirt stretched taut over his protruding belly. The stubbled goatee around his mouth was pure black, an unnatural color that looked like he had dyed his facial hair with shoe polish. As the man drew closer, his features came in clearer focus. He had a round face with a flat, upturned nose that was almost pig-like in appearance. His eyes were black orbs, the pupils fully dilated in the darkness. What I first thought was a goatee was actually a thick smear of tar-black filth surrounding his mouth. It looked like he had gone bobbing for apples in a tub of used motor oil. I wondered if he knew how badly he had dirtied his face. He gave me what was intended to be a smile, but it was more like the expression of a terrified primate. Lips drawn back, teeth bared, gums exposed. I tried to suppress a gasp of horror at the sight. He had 2 overlong front teeth, with an equally overlong pair of teeth on the bottom, except for some large molars far in the back of his mouth. The rest of his teeth seemed to be missing. Watery black saliva slicked his gums. A drop spilled over his lip and dribbled down his chin, and he made no effort to wipe it away. A heavy lump of fear lodged in my throat as my unease escalated into actual concern. I had seen news reports about this. A man pretends to be a construction worker to get a woman to pull over. Then he and his accomplices break into the car to beat her and rob her. Or worse. Just to be safe, I locked the doors. Then I checked my mirrors to see if anyone was sneaking up from behind or beside the car. There was no one around. That didn't make me feel any better, though. Being alone with the guy on a dark road was somehow worse. The man stopped next to my car and rapped on my window with one knuckle. A quick, polite double tap. I lowered the glass an inch, just enough to hear him speak.
Sorry, ma'am,
he said.
Road's closed for tonight.
Something in his mouth crunched like he was chewing on ice cubes. He swallowed, then pursed his lips and spat another stream of dark liquid onto the road beside my car. Closed? Like, completely closed? It didn't make sense. I had traveled the road in the opposite direction just a few hours before, with no problem. Even if the construction had started after I passed, why had I been allowed back onto the road in the opposite direction? There should have at least been some signs warning of construction ahead. Had I missed them? Had I dozed off just long enough to pass them by without noticing?
Completely closed.
The man acknowledged.
I'm afraid you'll have to go back the way you came.
I can't do that. I have to get home. Okay, how long until it's fixed?
We've got a lot of work to do. It could be a while.
Who's we? I bent forward over the steering wheel, peering through the windshield into the darkness. Seems like it's just you. The man looked at me with a steady gaze.
Ma'am, it would be best if you went home.
I'm trying, I said, irritation creeping into my voice. My home's that way. I pointed down the road ahead of my car.
Not that home. Home.
A tense knot formed in my stomach as I narrowed my eyes and peered at the man's face. It looked vaguely familiar, but I wasn't sure why. Do I know you?
I don't believe so.
Then how do you know where my home is? The man let out an exasperated sigh. He spat again.
Look,
he said, his patience waning.
Go check your daddy's pills, okay? Make sure you've done 'em right.
My mouth suddenly felt bone dry, and I swallowed hard. My fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that I felt like it might bend in my hands. You know my father? I rasped.
No, ma'am. And I don't think I want to.
I stared at the man for a second, my brow knotted in confusion. He leaned closer to the window until his face was only inches from the glass. My muscles tensed. I shot a glance at the passenger side seat, looking for my purse. I had a can of pepper spray stashed in the front pocket, but it was too far out of reach for me to get to it easily. I considered hitting the accelerator and blowing past the man, but the state of the road made such a maneuver impossible. The piles of asphalt spanned both lanes from shoulder to shoulder. Each was at least 4 to 5 feet tall, and the highway was bordered on both sides by guardrails, leaving me no room to steer around the piles. The road was, for all intents and purposes, impassable. The man spoke again. His voice was almost a whisper.
He's not sorry,
he breathed. The stench of hot tar streamed into my car.
He'll never be sorry.
The truth of his words hit me in the gut like a cannonball. I felt a sob swell in my chest. My eyes burned with the sting of hot tears. At that moment, it didn't matter to me who the man was, or how he knew what he knew. All that mattered was that he was right. No, I agreed. My voice was barely audible. Never. The man straightened up, his tone returning to normal.
Go on back. Check his pills. Get him right this time.
Then he turned and headed down the road toward the construction site, calling over his shoulder at me as he walked.
The road'll be clear once you do.
I sat in stunned silence, watching as the man picked up a piece of asphalt the size of a dinner roll from one of the piles, shoved it into his mouth, and began to chew. Even from a distance, I could hear the sickening crunch and grind of his teeth pulverizing the asphalt into grit. Pebbles of broken blacktop clung to his lips. Long tendrils of black spit spilled from the corners of his mouth and dripped down his chin like crude oil. The man swallowed, then picked up another piece of the road. As he lifted it to his lips, he seemed to sense that I was still watching him. He turned and smiled that grotesque smile, then lifted his hand in a silent goodbye. His palm was unnaturally wide, with short pink fingers tipped with long, curving yellowed claws, each as long as my index finger. They weren't the hands of a man. They were the hands of a mole. The sight of that horrific appendage finally spurred me into action. I swung the car in a wide U-turn, then stomped my foot on the gas. The tire spun on the pavement, spitting out a cloud of gravel and dust before catching hold of the road. As the car lurched forward, I risked one more look into the rearview mirror. The road behind me was illuminated in hellish shades of red by the taillights. But in the darkness, the man's pupils were as wide and black as the night itself. I stared vacantly at the road as I drove back up Route 322, my mind fully occupied with trying to comprehend what the fuck just happened. It was like a crazy hallucination, the kind of thing you experience in a dream and try to piece together into narrative after the fact. There was a construction worker, and he was eating the road. And then he told me about my father, and he had mole hands, and... I pushed the images out of my head and instead focused on where I was headed. Back to my father's trailer. I thought about the night I ran away. About the curl of my father's lip, the cruelty in his eyes, the smell of beer on his breath. About the bruises on my arms, my legs, my throat. About the smack of the screen door against the side of the trailer as I stumbled into the yard, bleeding from my broken mouth. About tripping over a huge molehill in my path, skinning my knees on the rough dirt before getting up and fleeing into the woods. I was only 15. Now, all I could think about were his pills. White pills, pink pills, yellow pills, green pills. I thought about how nervous I was while Delilah was explaining which pills were to be taken and when. I was nervous I would get it wrong, nervous about what would happen to my father if I had made a mistake. He was half blind with cataracts. He couldn't even see the pills he was taking. He just popped them into his mouth and swallowed them without a second thought. If I messed up, he wouldn't know until it was too late. The yellow pills were the painkillers. Opioids. Delilah said to give him one in the morning and one at night. Any more than that, and he could get addicted. He could overdose. He could die. When I finally arrived back at the trailer, I let myself in with the key Delilah had given me. The smell of stale beer and fresh urine attacked my nostrils as I entered. I could hear my father's ripsaw snoring coming from his bedroom. The words of the construction worker echoed in my head as I closed the door quietly behind me. Go on back. Check his pills. Get him right this time. Using the dim glow of my smartphone screen to light my way, I crept into his kitchen and opened the cabinet where the pills were stored. I flipped open each of the little plastic lids on the pill case, one for each part of each day. The pills were portioned exactly as Delilah had instructed, including the opioids. One in the morning, one at night, just like the doctor prescribed. I looked up at the cabinet containing the assortment of pill bottles. The opioids were in the front, right where Delilah had left them. I twisted off the cap and poured a handful into my palm. Then I picked up the pill box, dumped the other pills into the trash, and replaced them with as many yellow pills as the box could hold. There were no construction signs on the drive back from my father's place to my apartment. I hadn't missed them. I hadn't dozed. They simply didn't exist. There was no construction. There were no piles of broken asphalt blocking the lanes. The road to home, my home, was open and clear, just like the man had promised. I drove at a relaxed pace through the forest. As I passed the stretch of highway where the construction worker had stopped me, my thoughts again turned to the night I ran away. I thought about the freezing December air biting into my tear-streaked face as I sprinted through the woods, muscles spasming and teeth chattering. I wanted to keep running, but the cold was too much. Eventually, I gave up. Sitting against the snow-covered trunk of a fallen tree, I closed my eyes and drifted off into unconsciousness. Sometime later, I awoke in total darkness, certain that I had died. I was covered in dirt, buried in a layer of warm earth and a heavy blanket of leaves. I reached out my hands, feeling more dirt a foot or so above my head. A hail of loose earth dropped onto my face as I scraped my nails against the soil. I was in a grave, I thought. A shallow grave. But I wasn't dead. I was awake. I was alive. I rolled over onto my stomach and lifted my head. A dim shaft of light was streaming through the dirt in front of me. That's when I realized that I wasn't in a grave. I was in a tunnel. Belly crawling toward the light, I broke through a loose wall of earth and emerged onto an embankment beside Route 322. Once my eyes adjusted to the glare of the morning sun, I scrambled up the embankment to the shoulder of the highway and flagged down a passing truck for a ride. I climbed into the truck and closed my eyes, still wondering how I had ended up in the tunnel. I had no recollection of what happened after I passed out, but I was sure that the shelter, along with the heat-preserving cover of dirt and leaves, had saved me from freezing to death overnight. I was also sure that I hadn't crawled in there myself. The thought should have been scary, but it wasn't. I didn't feel afraid. I felt loved, cared for, protected. As the truck pulled onto the road, I glanced back at the tunnel one last time, and my breath caught in my throat. Staring back at me from deep in the shadows was a pair of eyes as wide and black as the night itself.
Part 1. A diner called Daisy's. This whole thing started on a road trip around 4 years ago. We left to go from Northern California to the East Coast, traveling through the Midwest. It was me, my wife Kimmy, our 7-year-old daughter Katie, and 5-year-old son Alex. Everything went fine for the first few days. We took our time with the trip because we weren't really on a constraint in that regard. We stopped at pretty much every landmark one can see whilst making a cross-country trip. But there was one night, in a state in the Midwest that I won't name, which led to a series of events that still hasn't ended. It was around 9 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and we had collectively decided to stop at the next place we saw to eat. We saw a sign to exit at the next ramp for a place called Daisy's Diner. We get there, and nothing seemed amiss. It was just about dark, and we decided that after we'd eaten, we would find a hotel for the night. Daisy's Diner was a classic small-town eatery with road signs on the wall and a waitress that called everyone Hun. It had a very classic small-town USA feel to it. The food had a home-cooked taste to it. I could certainly imagine this place being at its capacity on any given day. However, at the time we were there were only 4 other people in the restaurant. A man and a woman ate together at a booth, while 2 men separately sat at the counter. All 4 of the other patrons left before we did, and were replaced with 2 more men who came in at separate times. It was the last man to come in to bring what had happened to our attention. He informed me that if I was the one with the Hyundai truck outside, it had been ransacked. I ran outside, and sure enough, the passenger side door was open and everything had been rifled through. CDs were strewn about the seats. The paperwork from the glove box was on the passenger side floor. The backpacks my children had in the back seat with their belongings were opened and gone through. I was furious. I demanded to see camera footage only to find out the cameras were essentially for show. I asked to know who the people were that had left the restaurant before us. The solitary waitress only personally knew one of the men and vehemently vouched for him. Against my better judgment, I decided not to pursue him or the other still unidentified man, instead choosing to let the police handle the situation. I explained to the police that as far as I could tell, nothing had been stolen and no damage had been done to the car. The waitress gave the name of the one man she knew, and the police knew him as well. Not because he had run-ins with the law, but because he was a very active member in the local church, and was a man who was held in high regard by the entirety of the community. As for the other man, all I had seen was his back. Ultimately, nothing was done about the break-in besides the following of a record of the incident report and a casual, keep an eye out from police. I assumed the other man at the diner had seen our vehicle full of our belongings, out of our line of sight, and seized the opportunity. Carpe diem, you piece of shit. We were directed towards a motel in the small town in which we had eaten. Since it was now close to midnight and my wife wanted to lie down and get some rest, we decided we were safe enough to stay there, being that it was a motel, and there'd be other people there. Whatever logic I could scrape together is what I used to justify staying there because I was admittedly too tired to keep driving. However, when we got to the motel, it was as close to something out of a horror movie as could be. The sign had missing letters, and there were only 2 other cars in the dirty parking lot. That said, though, the area was well lit and would provide adequate shelter for a few hours. The man who helped us at the counter had a strange vibe about him, but checking into the room went without incident. Actually, until the morning, I thought the whole night had gone on without a hitch. When we were settled in the room and ready to go to sleep, I double and triple checked the locks on both the door to the outside and the door that connected to the next room. It wasn't an ideal situation, but such was the case that the only room with 2 queen beds was connected to another room. The clerk informed us that the only other person staying there was a woman at the opposite end of the motel, and went as far as showing us that the room connected to ours was empty. We all slept okay. In fact, for much longer than we had planned. I woke up in the morning and opened the blinds to check on the car, which I had parked directly outside the room. Nothing seemed out of place, at least on the outside. There was a small piece of paper that had been slid under the door to the outside. Assuming it was a checkout receipt, I ignored it and got ready for that day's drive. After a shower, I sat on the bed to watch TV while my wife inevitably took 4 times longer than me to get ready. It was then that I decided to take a look at the checkout receipt. I picked up the once folded piece of paper and opened it. My heart sank when it turned out to be a drawing from my daughter's backpack, but with a slight change. It was a picture of our family, but the thief had added a crudely drawn version of himself to it, and the words, "Nice to see you." Being that the addition to the drawing was done in crayon just like original artwork had been, there was nothing about the man I could discern. All I knew was that whoever had broken into our car had followed us to the motel and slid his drawing under our door. Or, at least that's what I thought. My son, the ever-questioning, observant young man that he is, was playing on the ground with some toy cars near the door, asked me what the rubber piece lining the bottom of the door to the outside was for. I explained that it was likely to keep things such as leaves and snow from blowing under the door and keeping either heat or cold air in. It was then that I realized that the rubber strip would have prevented a piece of paper from being slid under the door. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Whoever had set this drawing on our floor had done so from the inside. I checked the locks in the connecting door and found one of them to be unlocked. In an effort to spare my wife and children the horror I was currently experiencing, I just rushed them out under the guise that we'd slept late and I wanted to cover a lot of ground that day. I considered talking to the motel clerk, but by that time a younger girl was working the counter, and I wasn't going to stay there a second longer than I had to. We got back onto the highway without interruption and continued our trip. My wife asked me what was wrong, but I shrugged it off as being still tired. We made the rest of our journey with nothing out of the ordinary happening. Aside from the alarming incident at Daisy's Diner in the Galleria Motel, our road trip was actually pretty fun. Our activities proved to be a good distraction from the uneasy feeling I had in the pit of my stomach. I made sure to take a different route home so as to not pass through the small town where the incidents had happened. We finally returned home about 3 weeks later. All of our mail was piled up on our front porch, so I grabbed it as I walked back into our house for the first time in nearly a month. Unpacking and getting situated took precedent over looking through the mail, but I eventually got to it, and things began again. Towards the middle of the pile of mail, there was an envelope with no return address. I opened it and found a single handwritten note and a folded up piece of paper. "The girl is very good at pictures." I unfolded the paper and it was yet another drawing of my daughter's. This one was of a black and brown dog. I figured whoever was doing this had gotten our address from our vehicle registration or some other kind of document after going through the car. I informed the police, who did a pretty shitty job of making me feel safe. I kept what had happened from my wife as I knew she would just worry, and I wanted to keep my family as stress-free as possible. I wondered how many pictures my daughter had in her backpack, but in reality, I knew it was quite a few. I'll get to that later. Everything was fine for about a week until one day we got back home from a day at the park. We got inside and the kids ran over to the couch and turned on the TV. My wife walked into the kitchen to start making the kids something to eat. I went to the bathroom. When I got out, my wife was standing at the sliding door to the backyard. That's when I heard it. Barking. My thoughts raced and I refused to believe it. It couldn't be. Sure enough, a black and brown German Shepherd about a year old was tied to a fence post in our backyard. By this time, our kids had heard the barking and came to check out what was going on. We all ventured outside, and I told them to stay back while I inspected the dog. The leash was tied to the post in a way that made it look like the dog had jumped over the fence and gotten caught or something. I don't know. It really didn't make sense. It just wasn't completely obvious that someone had put the dog there intentionally. Upon meeting me, the dog licked my hand and rolled on his back to have its stomach pet. The kids then rushed me and began showering the dog with love, which it wholeheartedly accepted. He seemed enthralled with the kids, who returned the affection in droves. My wife found a soft spot in her heart and pleaded with me to keep the dog. It went against my gut, as I knew what the dog was the result of, but in my ongoing efforts to shield my family, I reluctantly agreed to keep him. We named him Roscoe, a name my daughter picked. In a weird way, I felt like I was giving whoever was doing this exactly what they wanted. I knew this hadn't been a coincidence. I just didn't know why it was happening. The dog incident didn't come off as a threatening gesture. None of it made sense. The dog quickly became a member of the family. He took a particular liking to Katie, which of course made me uncomfortable. While I was naturally pleasant to the dog and made sure he had a good life, there was a part of me that despised him. A part of me that hated what he represented. And that was the fact that there had been a strange man that had either personally or organized a dog based off of one of my daughter's pieces of artwork being placed in my backyard. I felt like he knew we kept the dog and that the dog was happy here. I felt like he had done this before and that he got off on it. But I had no way of knowing. I had already called the cops and they essentially told me there was nothing to be done. The way I saw it, and I'm sure they would have agreed, is that I wasn't necessarily dealing with what one would call a stalker. I mean, sure, there were stalking qualities to what was going on, but since we'd been home, we hadn't been followed, as far as I could tell, and hadn't received strange phone calls. The only correspondence was the letter that I had hidden from my wife. There wasn't exactly anything proactive I could do to protect myself and my family, so I figured I would just have to take everything as it came up. The end of the summer came and we always had a tradition. We would spend a week at my late father's cabin. The thought of canceling this year certainly crossed my mind, but I chose not to, as nothing else happened since we'd been gifted with Roscoe. So we packed up the car and made the 4-hour trip to the cabin, which was on the edge of a small town called Long Lake. Part 2. A town called Long Lake. Long Lake was a small town of cabins that people vacationed at. I don't think there were any permanent residents. The people who worked at the general store and restaurant there commuted from the town about 20 miles away. By this late in summer, people were scarce, if even there at all. When we arrived at our cabin, the neighbor we'd come to know over the years, an older man named Floyd who vacationed there with his grandkids, was packing up to leave for the year. Apparently, he'd spent about 3 weeks up there that year, much longer than usual. It turns out his grandkids were feeling as if they were too old for the annual cabin trip. I felt kind of bad for Floyd. I knew how much he looked forward to the trip. After introducing Roscoe to our annual neighbor, we said our goodbyes to Floyd, who promised to return the following year, even if he did it alone. I had the wife and kids start unloading the car while I went and unlocked the cabin. Before I approached the door, I stood there, looked off into the distance over the lake, and breathed in a big helping of fresh country air. It felt like a weight was off my shoulders being here, and not having to worry every day, wondering if that would be the day I got another one of my daughter's drawings in the mail. I felt truly at peace, even if only for that moment. That peace would quickly fade, though. When I got to the door of the cabin, it was already unlocked. No, chances are it was just left unlocked from us the previous year. I really had no ground to suspect anything other than that, even with everything going on. There was no way that the mystery man could have known where our cabin was, much less gotten there before us. I had kept a keen eye in the rear view on the trip up to make sure we weren't being followed, just to be safe. And I had no reason to believe we had. I opened the cabin door and the air was heavy and moist. There was a thick layer of dust on everything the eye could see, amplified by the rays of sunlight coming in through the windows. Everything was exactly as it was the year prior. I breathed easy, taking solace in the fact that it was more than likely myself a year ago that had made me worry so much presently. I walked to the master bedroom and fumbled with a fuse box until the power came on. My family entered the cabin, my children wide-eyed with excitement. They ran to the other bedroom, which contained bunk beds, and immediately began bickering over who got the top bunk. My wife went back outside to get another round of bags and suitcases while I got the water going. Knowing I had to personally get the electricity and water running gave me even more peace of mind. It meant that no one had been using these utilities in at least the past while, as evidenced by the dust. Things went well for the first day. We got settled, and I put off cutting the grass until the next day. We took a ride in the ATVs and played board games. The next day, I took my family to a spot across the lake that we'd taken the kids to every year. It had a small playground and an actual beach. There was a dock a little ways out into the water that my daughter was now big enough to play on with my wife, and my son enjoyed trying to catch fish with his hands at the shore. We grilled out and had a nice meal, and stayed there until almost sundown. My plan was to cut the grass when we returned home, but as we pulled into the small grassy area we used as a driveway, I noticed that the grass was freshly cut. My heart once again sank into my stomach. My wife commented that a neighbor must have done us a favor and went on about her business. I looked around and every other lawn that I could see was still uncut. I knew who had done this. Well, not exactly who, but I knew. I truly was confused at the motivations of this mysterious stalker. So far, he had given us a dog, who would quickly become a member of the family. And next, he cuts the lawn of our cabin for us. A part of me almost considered just accepting mine as it seemed harmless, and that feeling only grew in me when nothing bad happened the next day. But then, the fourth day came. It was about 7 a.m., and my wife took Roscoe outside so we could run around and use the bathroom. She tied his leash around a post that had been designated specifically for him and went inside to start cooking breakfast. Roscoe was a quick learner, and in the short time we'd had him, we trained him to do a few things. One of these things was to bark when he was ready to come inside. My wife cooked breakfast and I woke up the kids and we all sat down to eat. It wasn't until we were nearly finished that Katie asked where Roscoe was. Strange, I thought, that he hadn't barked when he was ready to come in. I figured he was just having a good time enjoying the openness of nature around him. I told Katie that Mommy had put him outside and that I would go get him. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I walked out of that cabin. Roscoe was on the ground. His throat had been brutally gouged open, so much so that he was nearly decapitated. Then from the horizontal throat cut was a vertical cut down to his testicles, and his innards had been removed from his body and placed next to him. His blood pooled in the grass around his small, lifeless body. I felt like I was going to throw up. I ran over to him and looked at his wounds. I could tell that it had been done with a blade of some sort and was not a random animal attack. Before I did anything else, I ran back to the cabin and told my family to stay inside and not look out the windows. I left before they could question me. As tears streamed down my face at the horror I was currently taking care of, I dug a hole for Roscoe. I gently placed him in the hole and pet his soft back one last time. I truly had come to care about the dog, no matter where he had come from. I filled the hole with dirt and went to put the shovel back in the shed. I don't know how I hadn't noticed it when I went to retrieve the shovel in the first place, but on the siding of the cabin was a message, written in what I assumed was Roscoe's blood. It simply said, Good doggy. I washed the message off before returning inside to my family. The entire time I had been dreading explaining to them what had happened. I sat my kids down and told them that while we were inside, another animal, probably much larger than Roscoe, had gotten into a fight with Roscoe and hurt him to the point where he had to go to doggy heaven. My wife and children cried, and I joined them. None of us could believe that we had just lost the newest member of our family. With this, though, I told everyone to pack up because it wasn't safe to stay in the area with such a large animal on the loose. They abided, and we were on the road within the hour. We stopped at the gas station just outside of Long Lake to get gas, pick up snacks, and use the restroom before we set out on our 4-hour trip. We all went inside, and thankfully, I was the first to come out. I saw it from the gas station doors. An envelope under my windshield wiper. I sprinted to the car in hopes to get it before my wife saw it. I succeeded, and immediately checked the area around me for someone. Anyone. There was no one. No cars driving in either direction and no one on foot anywhere for as far as the eye could see. I even made a circle both ways around the gas station and did a check inside the gas station itself and found no one that hadn't been there already. I wanted to ask the gas station clerk to see the security camera feed, but a cursory look around the place didn't reveal any cameras. That, and I didn't want to alert my wife to the note I'd found. I waited for my son to get out of the bathroom and told everyone to wait by the door for me. Inside the bathroom, I opened the envelope and took out the folded piece of paper. This drawing was one of our house that Katie had done about a week prior to our road trip. I remember because I had hung it up on her refrigerator when she finished, only for her to take it down to put in her portfolio. This one depicted our family in the swimming pool in our backyard. The addition to this scene was the same crudely drawn man standing behind the fence, with a pile of wrapped presents next to him. There was writing on the back of the picture this time, too. We are a happy family, parentheses. I didn't know what to think of this picture. My family and I had been swimming in our backyard countless times that summer, even after the incident in the Midwest when my guard was 100% up. I was positive no one had been spying on us. My only rational guess was that the man had used the pool in place of the lake we had swum in days prior, and the fence to be the tree line from which he could have spied on us. Whatever the case was, I folded it up, put it in my pocket, and got my family and I the hell out of there. I took random back roads and out-of-the-way turns on the somber ride home, much to the confusion of my wife. I told her I was checking something on the car. I was obviously seeing if anyone was following me, and again, I found no evidence of that. When we returned home, the first thing I did was cover up the pool for the remainder of what was left of the summer, much to the dismay of my family. I made up some bullshit about how the water levels had been affected in our absence, something that didn't really make sense but got the job I wanted done. I wanted to tell my wife what was going on. I really did. But at this point, I felt like I had already hidden so much that the focus wouldn't be on the issue at hand, but rather on my evasiveness. So I resolved to continue the charade. I was the protector of this family, and I was going to do just that. This wasn't anything I couldn't handle on my own, I told myself. In retrospect, I could have used all the help I could get. Part 3. A Time for Giving. Things were fine for a few months with nothing eventful happening. I found myself going crazy at the notion of not being able to do anything about what had happened. I'd forced myself to accept that the pool in the picture was a stand-in for the lake, and that this person had been watching us. I didn't know what to make of the presents, though. He'd already done what he did to Roscoe. I thought maybe that was the present. But then, He had already given the picture of the dog back to us when he gave us Roscoe. So that wasn't it. The kids went back to school at this time, something I was especially apprehensive about. I had to quell my worries, though, so as not to alert my wife as to why I didn't want to leave my kids. Ever. Luckily, as I said, for the first few months after summer, nothing happened. I was at a point where I felt more at peace than I had since this whole thing had started. Then, the Christmas season came. We had just put our tree up, hung the ornaments and all. We had a nice family dinner that night. I remember it vividly. Everything was great. The kids were excited for Christmas. My wife and I were a little less excited for Christmas shopping at the sardine can we refer to as the Christmas time mall in our town. Our kids were doing great in school. My wife and I were excelling in our careers, and most importantly, there had been no contact with the stalker. The only thing of any importance that happened during this period was that my wife sort of called me out. She detected that something was wrong from my general attitude of worry all the time, but I played it off. We talked for a while about all sorts of things, but we were happy at the end of the conversation. My rationale was that perhaps this was all over. Why bring it up now? That night, we all went to sleep happy. Now, I'm a heavy sleeper. That night, though, I woke up at 3:30 in the morning. Normally, if I wake up thirsty, I'll just soldier through it and fall back asleep. For whatever reason, though, that night, I got up and went to the kitchen for water. As I went to walk back upstairs, something made me turn my head towards the tree. The moonlight coming in through the window illuminated the tree, and that's when I saw it. There was a present under the tree. I quietly but quickly made my way over to the tree and picked it up. It was a small box, wrapped in green Christmas-style wrapping paper. There was a "To From" carved with a bow tied through it, though the "From" was just a :parentheses smiley face. The "To" was to Katie. I remember standing there for a moment in utter shock. This man had just been inside our fucking home. Before I did anything else, I went through the rest of the house top to bottom, making sure he wasn't still here. I went and checked on both the kids as well as my wife. When I felt satisfied after what felt like an hour of useless searching, I went back to the gift. I tore off the wrapping paper and ripped open the box. Inside were an envelope and a videotape. Yeah, a videotape. Like what they used before DVDs. I opened the envelope, already knowing what it was going to be. Another one of my daughter's drawings. I unfolded the paper, and sure enough, this one was of a princess my daughter had drawn. The princess was dressed in a pink ball gown, with a tiara and a wand. The addition to this drawing was what I'm assuming was a pool of blood beneath her. And in the corner, a tiny drawing of the man himself, holding what somewhat resembled a knife. This one really got to me. I didn't know if my daughter had drawn that picture imagining herself as the princess, or if the man himself had seen it that way. I had no way of knowing. I got rid of the box and wrapping paper so my wife wouldn't find it, and put the drawing and videotape in with my work things. The next day I went to a pawn shop and picked up a VCR. I got it for $3. Can you believe that? Anyways, I went home while the wife and kids were gone and went to the basement just in case they came home. I hooked up the VCR to the older television we had down there in our makeshift rec room and inserted the tape. Before I pressed play, a million different things ran through my mind. I wasn't sure what I was about to be watching. All I knew was that I wasn't going to like it. I was expecting to see video footage of my family shot from a hidden location. The first image was of a dark room with a white sheet hanging over a wall, running onto the floor, like a green screen. A person walks out from behind the camera, but not far enough to make out any kind of description. He's off to the very far left side of view. Only his right shoulder is in the frame. I hear a creaking of some sort, like something opening. Then I hear whimpering. A little girl whimpering. I hear a voice whisper, "Go." And then out walks a little girl of about 8 or 9, dressed as a princess. She was a spitting image of my daughter's drawing. Pink ball gown, tiara, and wand. She walked to the sheet and turned around, now facing the camera. Tears streamed down her face. The man went behind the camera and picked it up. His voice filled the hushed static that loomed over my basement. He quickly whispered, "Do it. Do what you're supposed to do." The girl started outright sobbing. A hand flies into frame and smacks the little girl. It made me wince. She stopped crying and began to act. She curtsied and introduced herself as Princess Penelope. That was the title of my daughter's drawing. Between sniffles, she went on to say how she was so happy she had been rescued by her prince, and how he had taken her to a huge castle to live happily ever after. She started sobbing again. The man's voice spoke again, this time more sternly, though still in a whisper. "Keep going." The girl sniffled herself back to a point that she could continue. My daddy was mean, though. He didn't want the prince to rescue me." My heart sank. I felt as if this was all allegorical to my daughter. The girl continued. "So now the prince is going to punish me because my daddy wasn't nice to him." The camera is set back on the surface it was on when the video started. The man then storms at the little girl and screams as he begins to stab her repeatedly. I couldn't watch, so I turned my head away. The sound was even worse. Her screams will never leave my mind. The man grunting as he thrust his knife into her will forever be burned into my ears. I looked back because I had to know who this man was. Every part of me had hoped he was foolish enough to show his face on the tape. But I knew he wouldn't. And of course, no such luck. In fact, he was wearing a mask of some kind. When he finished, he intentionally walked around the camera's line of sight, leaving only the poor girl's lifeless body in the frame, before shutting the camera off. I vomited repeatedly until there was nothing left in my stomach. The first thing I did was go to the police station. I regaled to them everything that had happened up to this point, from the car break-in to the dog to this. Now that there was a murder that definitely appeared legitimate and not staged, they seemed to take more of an interest. I told them I was keeping this ever-developing situation from my family, which they severely frowned upon and advised against, but said they would respect my decision, for which I was grateful. I got home later that day and my wife asked where I'd been all day. I told her I went to conduct an interview with a detective for a project I was working on. I'm a writer, by the way. She bought it. That night, she asked me what was bothering me. A few years of marriage under our belts, and this meant that she could read me like a book. I had to play it off. I told her I was frustrated with my current project and was having a hard time moving forward. Being the amazing wife she is, she gave me some encouraging words, which, had I actually needed them, would have cured the problem instantly. This is, of course, weighed on my conscience. It was the first time since everything began that I was actually tempted to tell my wife about it. As I've said, deep down, I wanted to. But in some selfish sort of justification, I felt I was doing a good thing by keeping them in the dark. In retrospect, I would obviously have told my wife everything from the very beginning. This was just a scary time for me. I wasn't exactly in my right mind. So give me a break. About a week later, the detective in charge of my case called me. He basically told me they had nothing. No idea who the girl in the video was, and she didn't match any missing children profiles in the national database. There was nothing that stood out about the room in which the video was filmed in. The only reason they knew the video was filmed any time recently was because there was a pack of cigarettes in the corner of 2 frames of the video, which had a logo that was new to the brand. I asked for a police officer to be stationed down the street from my house and at my children's school in unmarked cars, and they obliged. After this, nothing happened until March. While the police hadn't closed the case, it wasn't at the top of their priority list any longer, as a lack of leads made it come to a head. We no longer had police watching our house or the school. The calls from the detective got fewer and farther between, until I didn't hear from him at all anymore. I knew this wouldn't last, though. Every day I felt like I was going to get another letter. Or rather, he was going to try to get another letter to my daughter. I had just been lucky enough to intercept them up to that point. But my luck ran out, eventually. Part 4. A Change of Scenery. It was March, the month of my daughter's 8th birthday. As the days got closer, my anxiety rose. I felt like this would be prime time for this sick fuck to do something again. We got all the presents Katie wanted for her birthday and arranged to have a party at our house the day of, since it fell on a Saturday that year. We had a whole setup in the backyard. It was an arts and crafts themed party, which I was reluctant to do for obvious reasons. But my daughter was the definition of an artist. Inspired, motivated, and I was so proud of her. I just knew what some of her work had gone to and how it was being used, and it broke my heart. The party went well. All of her friends showed up. Everyone was having a good time. We all ate, and then she had begged enough to open presents, and we finally let her. We had them all set up on a table in the backyard. As we got deeper into the presents, the happier she got. Then, we got to a present that had no to from card on it. I locked eyes on the present. It was a box, wrapped in the same wrapping paper as the box that contained the video a few months prior. He had won. I couldn't jump up and rip the present out of my daughter's hands without alerting my wife of something. I also couldn't let her open it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have enough time to think. I hadn't even expected this. She opened the box and pulled out a piece of folded paper. I dropped my head. What was it going to be this time? Then she said it. "It's one of my pictures that was stolen," she said with a joyful tone in her voice. She clearly didn't understand what that meant. My wife looked at me. I just shook my head. My wife stood up and took the picture from her, followed by the box. Katie questioned it, but Kimmy directed her to open another present, which she happily did. We walked inside while the other parents took over supervision. I took the box from my wife and demanded she give me the picture, but she refused. She asked what was going on. I told her everything. I told her about the motel where Roscoe came from, what really happened to Roscoe, the videotape, the police reports. I told her about it all. By the end, she was in tears, and I didn't blame her one bit. She was furious at me for keeping it from her, and she was right to be. But I had felt like I was doing the right thing. At least we had kept our daughter from seeing whatever was inside the box, and that acted as a silver lining for my wife. After I told her everything, my wife opened the picture. This one was a painting. You have to understand that when I say my daughter is an art fan, it's because one medium just won't do. She draws, paints, uses crayons, markers, oil pastels, chalk. Anything that can create an image, she utilizes. And she makes pictures of absolutely everything. People, places, things. You name it, she's made a picture of it. She always said that when she grows up, she wants to be an artist and that she wants to draw the world. It's actually really inspiring. She kept every piece of her work in what she called her portfolio. When this madman took it from her backpack that night at Daisy's diner, he took a piece of her. This picture was of our son, Alex. The addition was apparent. A set of bushes was painted with a crude depiction of the man inside them to the side of our son. On top of the picture was a message, scribbled in red pen. Me and your brother are friends now. When will we be friends? This sent a chill down my spine. All sorts of scenarios went through my head. Had this man talked to my son? My wife ran outside to get him, and I looked in the box. It was a set of sketching pencils. On it was a formal note. Never stop drawing. My wife and son returned to the kitchen where I was in a cold sweat. We asked him over and over if he had spoken to or seen any men or women he didn't know recently, and he denied it. We told him he wasn't in trouble, and he insisted he hadn't encountered anyone he didn't know. We asked him if maybe it happened at school during recess, and he insisted nothing like that had happened. I believed him. He was a smart boy. My wife wasn't so sure. She politely ended the party as soon as the presents were finished being opened, and one by one, the children were picked up by their parents, while the parents who were there persistently asked if everything was okay. We said everything was fine, just that we had a family emergency. The police asked my son the same questions we asked and got the same answers. The detective came to the same conclusion I did, that this particular incident was meant to scare us, but had not actually happened. Because of the long periods of time between happenings, police advised us to begin questioning friends to make sure we weren't victims of an elaborate prank. This would have made me laugh if it hadn't made me nearly blind with rage. The man who was doing this was a killer. I'd seen it with my own eyes. I knew this wasn't a joke. Things again calmed down for about a month. Every day my wife was checking the mail. I don't know if she was hoping for a new letter from the stalker to be there, or if she was relieved every day that there wasn't. It began to take a toll on our marriage. Kimmy abhorred the fact that I had kept something so serious from her, and she began to resent me for it. She never did get over it. And again, I don't blame her one bit. Towards the middle of April, the kids and I returned home after I had picked them up from school, and Katie went upstairs to put her things away and start on her homework. She came back downstairs after about 2 minutes and found me in the living room. Her words fell so heavily on my ears that it physically hurt. "Daddy, someone left a letter for me." I swallowed the lump that had instantly formed in my throat and stood up so fast that the chair I was sitting in slid backwards across the wooden floor. I ran across the room and grabbed the letter out of Katie's hands. "Dear Katie, I would like so much to be your friend. I don't have a lot of friends, but your pictures make me so happy and they're so good. You're a very, very good artist, and to be a friend with someone so talented would be so fun. I don't think your mommy and daddy would want us to be friends, though, so maybe it could be a fun secret. I want you to draw me lots and lots and lots of pictures so that I can look at them all the time. I hope we can be friends." The letter was left unsigned. I was hit with a flurry of emotions. Sadness that my daughter had now directly been involved with this. Rage that this man continued to haunt my family unscathed by any attempts to find out who he was. And perhaps most prevalent of all, fear that I was virtually defenseless against this unseen threat. I called my wife, who immediately came home from work. We told the police about the letter, and they took it for evidence and tested it for fingerprints, which, of course, garnered no results. My wife and I had a long talk. We weighed our options. It came down to keeping the kids in the house and/or with one of us at all times, including taking them out of school and all extracurricular activities, or moving away. We chose the latter. We put our house up on the market and were moved out within a week and a half. After staying in an apartment in a different city until May, we then moved to a single-story ranch in southern Colorado. We got the kids enrolled in school, and my wife transferred hospitals. All in all, the move wasn't too difficult of a process, and for about 5 months it seemed like it had worked. There was no sign of the stalker. Our summer went by without a hitch. We took a successful road trip to Florida, which the kids loved. My wife and I repaired the strain in our marriage. Things seemed to be looking up for our family. That is, until we returned home one afternoon in late September. My wife got the mail and we had a letter from an attorney. Its contents were the details of going over my mother's will. My heart sank like it hadn't in quite some time. My mother wasn't dead. I immediately got my phone out and called her. It went directly to voicemail. I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. I called my aunt and again received no answer. My whole world was crumbling around me. I finally thought to call the retirement community my mother lived at, and when I asked to be connected to her room, I breathed a sigh of relief when I was told, "1 moment, please." The line rang and rang until finally, the phone on the other end picked up. It was my mother. "Hello?" she asked, her voice sounding as sweet as ever. "Oh my God, Mom. Are you okay?" "Well, yes, sweetie, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" "I just gotta..." And that's when it occurred to me. He had done this. He had found out where we lived and he had fucking done this. I stuttered for a moment before I told my mom I loved her and that I would talk to her soon. My wife asked me what I was thinking and I told her I thought it was a sick joke. She agreed. When my wife sorted through the rest of the mail, there was another envelope, this one addressed to Katie. In it was a picture she had drawn of Grandma. The addition to this picture were 2 dark X's over the main subject's eyes. The image will forever be imprinted in my brain. It made me physically ill at the time. I cried. I felt I had no way of protecting my mother, not without leaving my own family vulnerable. I called the detective that had been on the case back in California and told him the news. He agreed to put an undercover officer at my mother's retirement community for the next 2 weeks, something that gave me at least a little peace of mind. Thankfully, nothing happened to my mother. His sick jokes were just that. Jokes. I was at my wit's end with this whole situation. I felt as if it would never stop. This next period of silence would be the longest one. 7 months of no contact from the stalker. Then something happened that jump-started my desire to get to the bottom of the whole thing. I received a box addressed to me, with a colon parentheses but in the other direction like a frown. As the sender, I opened it and found a small child's hand. It was badly decomposed, but the fingernails had been recently painted. The fingertips were burnt down to the point that any type of identification would be impossible. Along with the hand was a Polaroid of a smiling little girl. It was the girl from the video I had received so long ago. If the police couldn't, I was going to try to find out who she was. I was determined to get some answers. You've been listening to the first 4 chapters of Daughter's Drawings by author Nick Botic, as performed by yours truly. You know, I fashion myself an artist as well, and you can find my artwork adorning all of the episodes from this program's first season, if you're interested in checking them out. I, however, have been fortunate enough not to have a depraved lunatic bringing my artwork to life. And you should all consider yourselves lucky because of that. Also, as much as I love my fans and listeners, please don't send me body parts in the mail. The post office keeps complaining my P.O. box is too small to hold them all. Up next, I've got the final 2 chapters and the thrilling conclusion of Nick Botic's epic saga, Daughter's Drawings, in which we'll discover what becomes of our maligned father and his family. And I'll tell you this much, as bad as things got sometimes, don't forget that they can always get worse. Unless you're dead. And who knows? That might just be part of the plan. Without further ado, I present to you the final 2 chapters and the conclusion of Daughter's Drawings. Part 5. A Trip Back. After making a copy of the picture, I took the contents of the package I had received to the police. Just as I had figured, the fingertips were much too damaged for any kind of identification. They checked the box itself for DNA, but it was, of course, wiped clean before being sent to me. The only fingerprints on it were from male personnel, who all checked out. They said they would keep the investigation open, but that was the same thing they had said so long before then. I definitely decided I was going to check it out myself. I told my wife that I had to go out of state to do some research for my current project. I'm pretty sure she knew I was lying, but she let me go without too much of a fight. Not wanting to leave my family without their primary protector, we set up an elaborate plan to transport each of our kids to different places. Our daughter went to my sister's house in Wisconsin, and our son went to my wife's parents back in California. I say elaborate because we had other people help out with decoy cars in the respective states for each trip to make certain they weren't followed. Once I felt that my kids were safe, I made sure my wife was comfortable staying home alone, which she assured me she was. I made sure she had ready and immediate access to the gun we kept in the house, just in case. And I set off for the Midwest. After just about 15 hours of driving, I arrived at the small town that was home to Daisy's Diner, which I decided would be my first stop. I pulled into the lot that I hadn't been in since the car was first broken into. It was dirtier than I remembered. The lot was littered with assorted garbage. This time I parked directly in front of the large windows of the building, so I could see my car from the inside. I walked into the restaurant and the first thing I saw was the same waitress that served my family and I during the first visit. Only this time, I took note of her name, Roberta. There were a few other people in the restaurant, 2 men eating together at a booth, a man and a woman eating together at another booth, and 3 men eating separately at the counter. I didn't recognize any of them. By her demeanor, I determined that Roberta didn't remember me from our previous meeting. I sat down and she asked what I wanted to drink. I told her I wasn't there for a meal. I took out the copy I'd made of the picture of the little girl and asked Roberta if by some miracle she had any idea who the girl in the picture was. She looked at it for what seemed like a long time, but ended up telling me she didn't recognize her. As she handed me the photo back, one of the patrons said loudly, "What the hell's going on out there?" I looked to him and saw he was directing his attention outside. I spun around, and there was a hooded man standing at the driver's side door of my car. I immediately got up and ran outside. As soon as I got to the door, the man took off running. I gave chase around the corner of Daisy's, and that's where I blacked out. The last thing I remember seeing was a mask under a hood, and something solid hitting me across the side of the head, knocking me unconscious. When I woke up, I was in the dark. I wasn't bound or gagged in any way, but I couldn't discern my surroundings. I found myself able to stand up straight, and when I did, about 25 televisions all turned on at once. They were all showing static, with the volume on full blast. I yelled, "Hello?" at the top of my lungs, but the sound of my voice was drowned out by the static. Then, so suddenly that it made me jump, Each of the screens changed to a picture. It was the same room I'd seen in the video of the murder of the little girl. The same white sheet was hanging up, draping onto the floor, though this time, blood stained the bottom portion of the sheet. I assumed it was the little girl's blood, but I had no way to know if that was his only victim. Somehow, I doubted it. A man came into the frame but kept his back to me for the entirety of the video. He spoke to me in a high-pitched, yet gravelly voice. The best way I can describe his tone is that it was childlike. He spoke like an excited kid.
"Hi, Katie's daddy. I'm glad you got my present. I don't want to do no harm to your daughter, the great artist. I just want her to be my friend and draw me pictures. I sent back the ones that weren't my favorites, but I've kept the ones that are my favorites, and those are mine now. All I want is a friendship with Katie. Katie. She's such a very good artist, Katie."
"But you won't let her be friends with me. You're making me get you out of the way, and I don't want to do that because friends don't hurt friends' daddies. I want to be a good friend and not a bad friend. So I'm going to make this simple, easy peasy, simple. If you promise to let your daughter, the artist, be my friend, I'll leave you alone. But if you still won't be nice, I'm going to get really angry." "Do you promise to be nice?" I muttered out. Yes, unsure as to if this was a video or a live feed, or if I was being watched or not. There were moments of silence, and then he spoke again, this time calmed down.
"Good. But since you are such a meanie pants, I'm not going to tell you how to get out."
Then he let out this sickening, childlike laughter. Then the video simply cut off. Now, once again in complete darkness, I felt the walls around me for some kind of door. I had noticed that behind the televisions, the space went farther back than I could see. I tried my best to move the TVs, but there were some old 50, 60-inch sets that couldn't be easily moved. I then thought to feel around the ceiling, which was just above my head, and at one point, I was able to push up, and sunlight slipped in through the cracks. Locked by nothing but a flimsy latch, I quickly got out and found myself in the middle of a large forest. There was a bag next to the hatch door that had all of my belongings in it. I took out my phone, which had as weak a signal as possible, and used its built-in compass after unsuccessfully trying to place a call to 911. After walking west, not sure why I picked that direction to head in, for about an hour and a half, I came to a road. Then, after going north for another 45 or so minutes, a truck pulled up and asked where I was headed. I told him Daisy's Diner. At that point, we were only about a half hour from the restaurant. I guess I'd walked in the right direction after all. The man was quiet and didn't ask me any questions, much to my appreciation. He dropped me off at Daisy's and nodded his head as a goodbye, shaking his head at my offer of gas money for the help, then sped off. I got in my car and looked in the mirror. I had a cut on my forehead that had been stitched up and cared for, but it still hurt like a son of a bitch. I realized that I finally had a signal on my phone, so I called the police. They came to me, and I took them back to the place I was held. The first thing they told me was that there wasn't anything in any direction for miles. No businesses, houses, cabins. Nothing. They searched the hatch I had been in but found all the televisions to be smashed and the cords cut. They searched behind the TVs where I had suspected there was a tunnel, but just around a small bend it stopped. It's like it was the beginning of a tunnel that never got finished. They again took a report and examined my injury, saying it had been properly stitched and treated. In the end, I was dropped off at my car at Daisy's and told I would be called with any further information, that they would be investigating the area around where I was held. By now, it was starting to get dark, and my head was absolutely killing me, to the point that I didn't feel comfortable driving for too long. So, I headed to the only place I knew was close enough for me to get some rest, and the possibility of an answer. I headed back to the motel, where I was given the first picture. When I pulled in, I looked through the window of the front office and saw the man from those years before. I can't say for sure, but it almost seemed like when he saw me, he picked up the phone, said a few words, and hung up. At the time, I thought it was just me being paranoid, because when I walked in, he didn't give off any signs of remembrance. He seemed genuinely curious when I brought up what had happened during my first foray at his place of business. After a short back and forth, I got a room for the night, went inside, and passed out before I could even take any safety measures. Luckily, I woke up and found that nothing had happened, at least until I went outside. I exited the room and saw that all 4 of my tires had been gouged open. All I could do was chuckle. This seemed like such a pathetic action compared to the psychological torture my family and I had endured at his hands before this. I called a local mechanic and he was there within an hour changing all my tires. Then, I was back on the road, again taking all the twists and turns I could to make sure I wasn't being followed. I returned home after about 20 hours of driving and got my family all back together. They had remained unharmed during my absence. Things went fine for quite a long time, over a year by my count. Then, one night, I woke up to a knocking on our front door. I got the gun from the safe and approached the door, which was repeating, knock, 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 knock. I disabled the alarm system, swung the door open, and saw that there was a folded up piece of paper on the doormat under a small rock. I stepped over the picture and ran into my front lawn to see who it was, as they couldn't have gotten far between their last knock and my opening the door. I looked down the street in both directions and saw no one. I'll admit, I wasn't quite thinking clearly. Even with the adrenaline, I was still half asleep, and I turned around and walked back to my door. I picked up the piece of paper off the ground and walked in. After closing and locking the door and resetting the alarm, I opened the paper to see which picture it was this time. This particular picture was a self-portrait Katie had done, a full-body drawing of herself. The addition to this one was that another thinly drawn version of the stalker was present, holding my daughter's hand. Katie had written above the photo the word, me, but now there was a bold X through it, and written next to it was us. Thinking it was just another attempt to scare us, I set the picture in a drawer and resolved to call the police. But first, I went to check on Katie. I went up to her room and pushed open her mostly closed door. I felt the color drain from my face, and that ever-familiar feeling of my heart sinking to my stomach. But this time, it was worse. This time, it felt like it never stopped dropping. Katie wasn't in her bed, and her window was wide open, a breeze blowing in, making her drapes wave. My daughter had been kidnapped. Part 6. A Man in a Mask. On May 18th, 2015, Caitlin Lorraine Botic was kidnapped from our home in Colorado. Even in the absence of activity from our stalker, we had never let our guard down, although my wife and I agreed that we had a gut feeling everything was a thing of the past. We thought we were free and clear. Obviously, we couldn't have been more wrong. I, my wife, the police, and the security company who had installed our alarm system agreed that the man, or men, waited until I disabled the alarm and then went in through the window and got Katie. Knowing that made me feel as if it was my fault. I was absolutely devastated. Strong efforts to find Katie were made over the following 2 months. Search parties, news segments, canvassing. Detectives even went to the Midwest and questioned employees and patrons at Daisy's Diner about the first incident that seemed so long ago. But nothing turned up any leads. My wife blamed me. She became very distant, refusing to sleep in the same bed with me, and only talking to me if it was absolutely necessary. Our son clung to her as I wasn't in a proper place at the time. I hate to say it, but at the time, I was too broken up to care. The only thing I gave any peace of mind to was finding my daughter. After a while, the efforts died down. We had exhausted the resources that are at one's disposal in the event of an abducted child. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I basically put my life on the back burner. I drowned my sorrows in whiskey, as cliché as that is. By the time that next letter came, I was on the edge of being nothing but a shell of the man I once was. About 4 months after Katie went missing, I received a letter, this time addressed to Daddy. As soon as I saw it, I broke down in tears. In my mind, just having that envelope in my hands was a response to the question that had plagued me since the day she vanished. Was my daughter still alive? I tore open the envelope, and inside, as I had assumed would be, was a picture. On the folded piece of paper was a chilling message. I'm home now. This one was one I'd never seen. It was a landscape. There were a lot of trees, what looked like a big field, and in the middle was another, though smaller, drawing of my daughter. The stalker had once again added himself in, again holding her hand, and this time he put a heart around the two of them. Pure, unadulterated rage coursed through my veins as I gripped the picture, crumpling it within my fists. The next part, though, was what I wasn't sure about. There was a half-done visage of a barn in the corner of the page with an X on top of it, and a lazily done sky. Though it wasn't like her other works, I could tell my daughter had drawn it. Seeing it on the same page as the man's edition let me know that. The styles were too different to have come from the same hand. And then it hit me. My daughter was trying to let me know where she was. Or at least that's what I made out of it. I looked in the envelope and found a handwritten letter from the kidnapper. Hello, new daddy. I hope you know that I'm not a bad, mean man. I just really like the pictures and want all of them to look at all the time. I just really wanted her to be my friend. And now she can live with me and make pictures all the time. I promise I will not hurt her because I do not hurt my friends. If I did, that would not make me a very good friend myself. We would like you to visit, if you can find us. I don't want to tell you right away because then you will come right away, and I don't want you to take her away before you have a chance to calm down. What I'm saying, sir, is that she now lives here. But if you can find us, you can visit. But you have to come alone. If you bring anyone else, I will skin her like a deer before you even get close. Once again, unsigned. Before I had a chance to weigh my options, I had made my decision. The police hadn't done a goddamn thing to help me so far. Despite this man's clear lack of education, I wasn't going to take his threats with a grain of salt. I had to do this alone, for the safety of my daughter. I retrieved the gun we kept in the house from the safe, went to a store to buy more ammunition and extra magazines. As I packed a bag after returning from the store, my wife, in a rare show of concern, asked what I was doing. I elected not to tell her what was going on. The only good it would do is bring up a barrage of questions that I was in no mood to address. She's not a stupid woman either. I'm sure she put the pieces together shortly thereafter, if not immediately. I gave my son a kiss on the forehead goodbye and set out on the road towards the place this all began. Daisy's Diner. I pulled into the nearly vacant lot of Daisy's Diner. I again saw the same waitress that had been there the other 2 times. I walked in, and the woman gave me an odd look. She recognized me but couldn't place it. I don't blame her. It had been quite some time since I'd been there. She asked what I wanted, and I ordered a Pepsi and 2 scrambled eggs. When she brought my drink, I told her I needed to talk to her about something that happened a few years prior. She was reluctant to talk, but agreed nonetheless. I reminisced with her about the night our car had been burglarized, which to my surprise, she actually recalled. I practically begged her to rack her brain and identify the man who had gone unidentified the night of the incident. She told me she could barely remember back that far, and that she hardly remembered the incident in general, much less that detail. I asked the woman what I now realize was a rather vague question at the time. I inquired about any barns in the area. Much to my dismay, this was a farming community. The small town Daisy's Diner sat in was surrounded by endless acres of farmland. I took a shot in the dark, hoping that this kind woman's familiarity with her assumed hometown could provide some insight, and asked about any barn in the area that might have an X on the roof. She gave me a look that told me she knew something, but ended up denying any knowledge of such a place. I knew she was lying. So I started on a wild goose chase of farmland. I drove around nonstop for hours, down every dirt road, every side street, every driveway. It was dusk when I finally came across something that I thought might lead me to the right place. I came to a gate with a sign on it that read Biloxi Farms, with the X much larger than the rest of the letters. As there was no way to drive my car in, I parked it in a small opening in the wooded area next to the gate that closed off the dirt road that led to God knows where, and ventured off on foot, gun in hand. For reference, this ended up being about a 20-minute drive in the opposite direction of Daisy's as the area I was put in the hatch. I must have driven past it twice in the dark, not seeing it until daylight started sweeping over the lonely land. I walked on the dirt road until I saw 3 buildings in the distance. Right away, though it was far, I could barely make out a structure with a large, probably wooden X on the roof. I knew I was in the right place. There could have been 100 farms with 100 X's on 100 roofs. But somehow, I knew I was in the right place. Call it father's intuition. I was about a half mile from the area where the structure with the X was, and as I got closer, I saw 2 other structures. The closer I got, obviously, the better I could see what I was walking up to. I circled around the land, hoping to enter the immediate area from a point I wouldn't be instantly spotted at. I was going to come in from behind. When I got close enough to see clearly, I saw a farmhouse, a barn, which was the structure that housed the large X, and what looked like a detached garage. I thought about Katie's picture. Given that she drew the picture of the barn, chances are she was being held in one of the other 2 structures, so I resolved to check those first. I made sure to keep a long distance between myself and the area the structures were in, keeping about a 150-yard perimeter. I walked through the tall grass on one side, ran through a small opening, and went into a cornfield which led me to the rear of the structures. I scoped it out a while and saw no movement of any kind in any of the 3 buildings. What I did see, however, was an old beat-up pickup truck, parked next to the garage. I flipped off my gun's safety and ventured inward. I made sure to be as quiet as possible as I traveled to the next to impossible to go through off-the-path cornfield. What should have been a few minutes' walk turned into about 20 before I came to the clearing. I was about 15 feet from the back door to the house, which was wide open. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to get some idea of where somebody was, I'm glad I did, because just then, I saw the man that had kidnapped my daughter. All those years earlier, while we were eating our meal at Daisy's Diner, a man came in and told us that if we were the ones with the Hyundai truck outside, that it had been broken into. The man who told us was the man who did it. Racking my brain, I vaguely recalled the man having a bag with him. If I was a betting man, I'd say that my daughter's portfolio was in that bag when I thanked him for letting us know what had happened. I felt sick. He was one of the only people I hadn't considered as a suspect. Given all the commotion, I hadn't even registered the man's odd voice in my brain. Thinking back, if I'd have paid more attention to his voice, I'd have known it was him right away. My eyes filled with tears, but I got my bearings and got back on track. The man walked out the back door and over to the detached garage. When he entered, I made a break for it. I sprinted across the backyard and leapt up the 2 stairs directly into the house. I still had no idea if anyone else was there, but I didn't care. I was blind with determination. Thinking quickly, I ran to a door that I hoped would lead to a basement. It was my idea that the area the video was filmed in was the basement. I closed the door behind me and headed down the dark stairway, creaking loudly with every step I took. I made it to the basement floor and used the flashlight on my phone as guidance. There were dead animals lined up on the ground in some sort of pattern I didn't care to figure out. Then, I shined the light on the walls. Every foot or so, save for a few empty spots, were pictures my daughter had drawn hanging on the walls. It made me sick. But if there was any doubt I was in the right place before, there definitely wasn't now. I stepped my way around the dead rabbits, cats, dogs, and small animals like gerbils and hamsters, and into another area. It smelled like absolute death. There must have been 100 dead animals down there. Sure enough, it was where the video had been filmed. The sheet hung from the ceiling, draping onto the floor, bloodstains still splattered over the bottom of it. Now that I knew I was absolutely in the right place, I decided to stop sightseeing and scour every inch of the hellhole until I found Katie. Then, I heard the screen door open upstairs. I stood in silent waiting as I heard the floor creak above me, doing my best not to gag on the putrid smell that engulfed me. The walking upstairs stopped for a moment, then picked back up as whoever was up there walked back to the back door and exited the house once again. I checked the rest of the basement, but she obviously wasn't there. I quickly made my way back upstairs and back into the kitchen. I walked through a threshold into the living room, which was nothing short of being a product of hoarding. There was garbage covering the entire floor. What could once have been used as a couch was now home to maggot-filled takeout containers and empty beer and soda cans. To my left was a stairway leading to a second floor, where I saw something highly disturbing. There were pictures lining the stairwell, and in these pictures were a familiar bunch. The waitress at Daisy's Diner, holding hands with the man who ran the motel. Next to them was the man who had my daughter, and next to him were 2 of the cops that had helped me when I'd had troubles in this town. Finally, there was a picture of the man who had given me the ride to Daisy's after I was abducted. I felt like everyone knew. Everyone in this town knew what was going on, and they were in on it. When I was done with this, I was going to contact the FBI and blow the lid off this fucked up place. I found my mind wandering, but I got back focused and went upstairs. All I found up there was more garbage lining the floors in the hallway. There were 2 rooms on the left side, and one on the right at the end of the hall. At the top of the stairs was a bathroom which rivaled the deepest depths of a sewer. Shit and piss covered the floor around the toilet. Wet towels and clothing covered the rest. I walked down the hall and peeked into the first room on the left. It was literally nothing but garbage. The second room contained a solitary mattress. It was old, soiled, and stained with only God knows what. The room on the right held nothing of any importance either, except that when I looked in it, I heard the door close once again. I stepped into the room and hid behind the door. I heard footsteps coming up the steps towards me. My first reaction was to go out the window, so I did. As quickly as I could, I got outside and shut the window behind me. I stayed up there for a few minutes and then saw the man go back into the garage. I had a feeling that's where my daughter was. I crawled around the roof and climbed down some lattice to the ground. I sprinted over to the garage and took a peek inside a back window. It was set up like an art studio. The man was sitting at a desk, drawing. As I watched him, he stopped. Without breaking his gaze that he had on the paper on the table beneath him, he reached down to his left and pulled up a mask, placing it over his head. It was a plastic mask that had hand-drawn designs all over it. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked directly at me. All I heard then was a loud, shrill, childlike voice saying, "Daddy!" And the man stood up and sprinted at the front door of the garage. I ran around and found him running to the barn. I ran as fast as I could after him and fired 2 rounds, missing both. He ran into the barn and I quickly followed. The only light in the barn was from the sunlight coming in through holes in the ceiling. It was a generally wide open area, with one small vestibule in the far corner, and a stairway that led to a railingless loft area that had plywood boards sticking up in random places. The floor was covered in a thin layer of hay and oil spots. Towards the back were some hay bales. The man's immature voice filled the open air of the barn. "You see that, Katie? He's finally come and visited us. I bet he wants to see your new pictures that you draw in here." "Where is she?" I screamed. "She's close," he said before giggling uncontrollably. I expected the man to be up in the rafters, so I sprinted across the open floor of the barn towards the blocked-off area in the far corner. At the last possible moment, in my peripheral vision, I saw him. He tackled me from the left side. He must have been hiding behind one of the hay bales. What happened next wasn't a long, drawn-out fight. I didn't lose my gun in the ensuing brawl. So if that's what you were hoping for, I'm sorry. Real life isn't like the movies. He tackled me to the ground and I wrestled with him for about 1.5 seconds. Then, when he got on top of me, I pressed the barrel of the gun onto his throat and pulled the trigger, blowing a hole out the back of his neck. That sent blood flying into the air and raining down on me. He struggled to breathe for a few moments before falling lifelessly on top of me. I pushed him off and ran to the vestibule in the corner. It was locked by a large master lock. A bullet took it right off. I ripped the door open and found it empty. My heart once again sank. I stepped inside, frustrated, but instantly felt a hollow floor. I kicked the hay out of the way and saw a trap door. I opened it to find my daughter, unconscious inside, bound at the hands and feet, with a sock in her mouth with tape wrapped around her head. In tears, I picked her up and freed her from her restraints. I brought her outside and began to call 911, only barely recalling that the police knew the man who did this and were likely friends or family of his. Long story short, my daughter regained consciousness. She sobbed uncontrollably as I held her in my arms. We made the walk back to my car and drove off. We made it to the next town over, where I then contacted the police. I told them what had happened, and they took it very seriously. Federal investigators were called immediately and arrived shortly thereafter. I took them to Biloxi Farm, where they taped everything off as a crime scene. In what I thought was the end, they arrested the waitress at Daisy's and the man who ran the hotel. Turns out they were husband and wife, and the man who kidnapped my daughter was their son. I learned a few months later, after the motel owner turned state's witness against his wife, that the wife and son had a child together, and the girl from the video was their daughter. The police officers that were photographed with these people were also investigated and jailed for various crimes related to their family. Apparently, this was the first time anything of this magnitude had been done by the family, but they were suspected for numerous robberies and attacks at the motel that the local police looked the other way on, bungling the investigations intentionally. The only thing that wasn't found at the scene of the crime was my daughter's portfolio. The only information Katie could give about her captor was that he always wore different masks. When asked if there were multiple captors, she said she only saw one. I suspect that she only saw one at a time. He apparently forced her to sit in the garage, which he had fashioned as an art studio, and make pictures for him all day long, day in and day out. Nothing else. Thankfully, there was no evidence of sexual assault or physical abuse. When the man, whose name I found out to be Atoll, realized I was in the area, he went to the garage, brought her to the barn, tied her up, knocked her out, and put her under the floor in the vestibule. Additionally, the area under the trapdoor was a tunnel, something I hadn't immediately noticed when picking Katie up out of it. These tunnels went under the entirety of the land on Biloxi Farm, and much, much further. It connected to where I had been taken to after being knocked unconscious at Daisy's, in addition to many other areas throughout town. However, the tunnel had been collapsed behind the TVs in the hatch I was taken to, more than likely to not give evidence of an advanced tunnel system. I returned home with Katie to my ecstatic wife and son. Our family was finally back together, and the people that did this were either dead or in prison indefinitely. Everything was good, quiet, and uneventful for over a year. My family got back on track. We got Katie acclimated to normal life again, and got her the professional help needed to get through her trauma, which was going quite well until last week, when an unmarked envelope showed up on our kitchen table when we got home from a day at the museum. Inside was a picture my daughter had clearly drawn. This one was of a man in a mask, with all kinds of designs on it. I could tell the addition made to this one was a knife in the hand of the man, crudely drawn with a charcoal pencil. Above the picture, in scratchy writing, were these words: "Now you've made me really mad."
Chilling tales for dark nights.